All right, everyone. So a little bit. Okay. Welcome to the Thursday night class. This week is Parsha Shemini. We're going to learn a discourse. We began it a few weeks ago. I started this discourse on my birthday, and we did it for 2 weeks, and then we had to learn something else, so we discontinued. This week, we're going to do a continuation. We're holding by class 3 in this fabulous discourse. So we're holding in by discourse 3 in this special Mizmor L'Soida. This is in the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe. I'm sure it has a connection to this week's Parsha Shemini. Bezrat Hashem, I'm sure it will come to me while we're teaching. Bezrat Hashem. But either way, it's a very, very, very special discourse. I'm going to do a little point synopsis, just to be able to catch us up, because the class was a few weeks ago. I think the second class was a month ago. And now we're picking up. This is in the Siddur of the Alter Rebbe, page 146. The discourse begins on page Ayin Beis, but the part that we're continuing now is on page 146. Tonight's class I want to dedicate to two very special grandmothers. Both my grandmothers, my father's mother and my mother's mother. Both of them have yortzites back to back. My grandmother's my father's mom's yortzeit was today on the 21st of Adar, and my mother's yortzeit is tonight, which is going to tomorrow, the 22nd of Adar. So we're now sandwiched between my two grandmothers, and I want to dedicate this class to both of them. So my father's mother, whose yortzeit was today, her name is Chana Tzivya Bas Rebbe Yecheskel. May her soul have a great aliyah, and she channel a lot of blessings down this way. To myself, my family, and all those who participate in the classes. She was an extraordinary woman, missed and adored by everyone that knew her. And then my other grandmother, whose yortzeit is tonight, my mom's mother, Rivka Basra Menachem Mendel, may her neshama have a great aliyah to the greatest of heights. May she channel lots of brachas. Also here and to everyone, and she too is a very special woman. So Baruch Hashem, I have very special grandmothers, moms that I'm very, very fond of, and Baruch Hashem, obviously, there's chus that I can teach and I can share Torah, so let this hopefully give them a big boost up there. Okay, so here we go. Just as a recap, we learned that the idea of, there's two names of Hashem. There's the name of Elokim and there's the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei. The name of Elokim is the outer garment. The name of Elokim is the name in which is the kind of where all the systems come from. Elokim is already God as he cements his energy into certain definitive patterns. And that's the source of nature. That's why Elokim is the numeric value of Hateva, which is nature. Then there is the transcendental energy, where God's energy is not yet formed in any specific form, with any specific detail. Hello, your copies are here, prepared. So if you should get yourself a drink, some water or something. This is still the mimer we learned a few weeks ago. We're continuing. We started 2 classes and then we stopped. So now we're continuing 3rd class. And I'm doing a brief, since you remember everything we learned, then you don't even have to be here by the review. So the name of Elokim is the name of the divine that is fixed. The name of Avaya is the energy of God that transcends all definition and all limitation and all boundaries. And that's why we say when a miracle happens, there is a revelation of Havaya in the realm of Elokim. Now, the truth is that even when God is running the world in a patterned, limited, kind of definitive way, which we call nature, that's only to our eyes. It's only the perception that we have. The truth is that it's always God's very infinite self that is decreeing from absolute nothings that things should be the way they are, not because things are running that way in a fixed pattern, but because God is repeating his infinite creativity and his infinite miracle every second to be like it was a second before, not because it is really defined, but because it's this constant innovation, totally from a place of freedom, totally from a place where he's not kind of limited to it, yet freely choosing to create without anything to compel him that way, just because he wants so. But because he is choosing to do so in a continuous way, it gives off a appearance to us as if there is a fixed energy, that things are fixed and defined. And that's the name of Elokim. But really, if we're smart, and if we're, I don't want to say smart, if we're wise and we look deeper, we understand that even nature itself is really not nature. And then we can have a very intimate connection to God, because then we're never stuck in anything, because we always realize, and anywhere, in any situation we are, it doesn't have to be the way it is. And we can always expect a miracle. We always reach for a miracle, but it also calls for us to be very, very close to Hashem, because we realize that we can't rely on anything other than his infinite love to us, to create us and give us and to sustain us. And when we are in that level of consciousness, then we are completely surrendered to him, as opposed to when we live with a sense of Elokim, then we have a certain sense of false security. In other words, we feel ourselves as kind of from God, time to God, we need, God to do us a favor. We need God to, run us a miracle. But regularly, we kind of feel like we're secure in our existence. And then obviously our heart is not so tuned in to our mission and our purpose, because we feel our own egos a little bit more. We're more self-substantiated, as opposed to being totally given over to him. So when we're living in the higher consciousness of Havaya, we are in a much greater state of bittul every second, because we know we are not. Nothing about us is. Nothing is like it is just because it is. Yeah. Regular people live, at least, till a decent old age. Regular people that are healthy are healthy. The economy is pretty good. It's not the best, but things are pretty running good. So if I did well last week, I'll do pretty well this week, unless some, crazy earthquake or some crazy, who knows what, God forbid, nuclear war breaks out. Yeah, it might be a problem, but, we don't have to worry about that. Things are running as they run. That comes from a person being in a state of distance. Now, does that mean that if we're close, we're in a state of anxiety? No, quite on the contrary. We're very, very surrendered to the supreme infinite being. We realize that nothing is guaranteed, but we also know that God, we can rely on him because he's essentially good. So if we are totally devoted to him, he will take care of us. Not through any systems, just because he, with his infinite love, will be there for us. So it's a much higher way of living, to live with the consciousness of Havaya and not be stuck in the stuckness of Elokim. Now, regularly, it's all the time, even when it appears to be nature, it is really miracles. It is really Havaya. That's the concept, if we say in this passage of the Mizmor, the Psalm 101 in Tehillim, we say it every day after Baruch She'amar, the Uki Havaya hu Elokim, that Havaya is really Elokim. That's always. However, in the regular state, in the regular circumstances, which means under regular, when we are experiencing life in the natural, so only a very wise person and someone who's really tuned in sees Havaya Elokim. But most people live on the outer peripheral of things, even when we acknowledge God, but we're acknowledging the system. The system kind of is still, dominant in our minds, that there is a certain system. God runs the world, but God is running the world in kind of acting or behaving or in a systemic way. That is the concept of, hello. Hi. In that sense, God is you have a copy right over there. So, as a welcome. I haven't seen you in ages.
Thank you.
Okay, but you're here. Thank God. Okay, very good. Good. So, that's again on when things are regular. Then there is what's called when a miracle happens. When a miracle happens, God is allowing Havaya to really reveal itself, because then we see something that's impossible happening, and it happens. So the Pnimi is the inner energy of Havaya, which is a much higher state, expresses itself on the outside. When that happens, we're stunned by the divine, by the incomprehensible. When God is operating through a system. So that is something that then we can relate to God kind of with our understanding. Because the systems we can kind of understand. Because the systems put God into a certain definitive, like you say, the systems of science, that's just the way things work, even though we can't explain things all the way to the end, or why they work that way, and so on and so forth. But it has some kind of a grasp, because the mind, since it has definitions, anything that is defined, the mind can grasp. So in that sense, we can have an understanding in the divine. And our appreciation of God is more intellectual. It fits into our head. God fits, the name of Elohim can fit in our head. The name of Avaya, which is the transcendental light, where God transcends everything, that's infinite, and that's boundless, that's beyond definition. That's not perceivable in our mind. That's above us, but it doesn't mean we can't communicate with it. We could communicate with it, we can connect to it, but the way we connect to it is through acknowledging it, through surrender. It's above our mind. We submit to it. That's the idea of hoda'ah, modin. Modin means I surrender to you. So to Elohim, we can interact with understanding, with our minds, with our intellectual cognition. To Havaya, because it's infinite light, we connect to that through this surrender. So when a miracle happens, the response to a miracle is always hoda'ah. Why is the response to a miracle a hoda'ah? Like on Hanukkah, for instance, the sages instituted that we should respond with la hodos ula halel, to thank, and thanking, the deeper in Hebrew, the word thanking also means surrendering. To surrender and to praise. It's the recognition of the transcendence. It humbles us. We become completely humble before the awesomeness of God. So the response to Havaya, the connection to Havaya, is a manner of hoda'ah. And that was also the idea of the special sacrifice, which is called the sacrifice of the Toda. In the time of the temple, when a miracle or a special, extraordinary kindness that God did for a human being, then the person would have to bring, and it called for a special sacrifice called a korban Toda. And that korban, we learned about it last week in the Torah portion. Parashat Tzav talks about the korban Toda. That Toda, in particularly, is a Toda that is being offered to Havaya. Now, all korbanos in general are to Havaya, but from all the korbanos, that korban is the most to Havaya, because the idea of the korban is a complete surrender to God. As we're going to see soon, that's the reason why. That's going to be in today's subject, in today's part of the Maimer, where he's going to explain that's the reason why it will allow us only by the korban Toda even to bring chametz. Generally, we were now allowed to integrate any chametz into any korban, any leavened breads, but only by the Toda. As we're going to see why. We're going to get to that later. But the concept over here is a confrontation, a interaction with a miracle means an interaction with a higher level of the divine, in which we have to be modin. Now, another very important point that we had learned in the first class, that connection to Havaya, as opposed to the connection to the level of Elokim, is also the difference between Chachma and Bina. Bina, which means understanding, understanding is related to the name of Elokim. The name of God associated with the attribute of Bina is sometimes referred to as the name of Elokim. The name of Hashem associated with Chachma is the Shem Havaya. Like it says in the Pasuk, Havaya b'Chachma, that the tetragrammaton, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, is in wisdom. And why is that? Because Chachma is a flash. Chachma is a revelation almost like from above. It's that epiphany. It's that first, it's still above your head. Bina is grasping, assimilating it. Like the right side of the brain, left side. Creative mind is where flashes happen. New inside, outside of the box stuff come in because it's above the mind. It's almost like, we suspend our own previous knowledge and suddenly are illuminated by some new possibility that's bigger than us. So the experience of Chachma is one of surrender, the one of awe. It's like seeing something bigger than you. Chachma is also called vision. You're seeing something. You don't have to understand it, but you're seeing it. It takes you, it overwhelms you, and it brings you into a state of nullification. Bina is you're returning to self, and you are trying to assimilate this idea into yourself. And obviously that comes already by limiting and defining it. And, it's more of a condensing and a lowering of the energy. So Bina is associated with Elokim. That's why Bina is called Yesh. Bina is called something already. Chachma is called Ayin, nothingness. Chachma is still Ayin. It's still transcendent. It's above. It's not. It's undefined. And that's why, again, Elokim, which is in Bina, there is grasping. There is a comprehension. And Havaya, which is Chachma, which is still nothingness, it's still above the understanding. Our relationship with Chachma, as we said, is Hoida, is to acknowledge, to surrender to it. But we learn that what is the idea of a miracle in which you bring a Mizmor Toda? The idea of a miracle is that even in the territory of Elokim, there is a revelation of Havaya. What does that mean? Ordinary people, this world which is dominated by the name of Elokim, this world that is operating in a very systemized, natural kind of, at least an appearance of the shell of Elokim, is very dominant. When a miracle happens, all the way in this physical reality, something cracks and Havaya is revealed. So to take that up in the spiritual supernal spheres, that means that Chachma is overwhelming Bina. Bina is fixed and defined. When a miracle happens, usually Chachma feeds Bina by diluting its energy, and Bina grasps what it can grasp. But the essential Chachma light remains above. The idea of the miracle means a marriage between Chachma and Bina. And when that happens, what happens is in the space of Bina, there is an illumination of Chachma. So Bina kind of gets the understanding, the mind dissolves in the wonder, in the awesomeness of the Chachma. That's called the unity between Chachma and Bina. That's why it says, we brought this in the Kabbalistic meditation that is associated with this particular part of davening. When we say Mizmor Toda, we brought from the Siddur of the Arizal, it says that when you're saying Mizmor Toda, it is a yichud, it is a unification that's taking place between Chachma and Bina. Because that's what the Toda is. Toda is for a miracle. Toda is the surrender, and Bina is surrendering to Chachma. That's what's happening. Elokim dissolves in Havaya. And that's the yichud, that's this unification of Chachma and Bina together. It's a very liberating moment. It's a very freeing moment. And it brings us to the utmost humility. But then we continue. This was like 2 weeks, the first class. In class number 2, we learned that the continuation of that Mizmor is Mizmor l'Saida hariyu laHashem kol haaretz. Shout out to God, the entire earth. Well, when a miracle happens, we're all baffled. And everybody shouts out, wow. And you recognize God. The earth that generally is not necessarily so enthused, excited, or preoccupied with God. The earth, which is filled with everybody busy recognizing themselves and all the systems around them, and worshiping all the various idols, which are the various different systems. Suddenly, we all cry out to God, the whole world. We recognize. A miracle happens, and we're singing, everybody, you acknowledge God, but we learned also in the Siddur of the Ari, that the acronym, the first letters of the words Hariyu Lashem Kol Haaretz spells the word halacha. Hariyu is a hey, Lashem is lamed, Kol Haaretz, hey lamed chaf hey halacha. Now, what does that have to do with halacha? What's halacha? Halacha is Jewish law, Torah law. What does halacha have to do with Hariyu Lashem Kol Haaretz? So in the last class, we had an amazing discussion in which he explained that this dominance, that Chachma dominates over Bina, as much as it is in a miracle, it's even stronger and even more dominating the Chachma over the Bina, the Havaya over the Elokim in Torah law, through Torah and through Torah study. When we are learning Torah, you come, we're open.
Oh, okay.
When we are learning Torah, we are entering the zone of Havaya. Creation comes from the name of Elokim. And Torah comes from Havaya. Torah is transcendental light, transcendental energy of the prefixed infinity of God, which is not fixed into definition. That's why we know that the introduction of the giving of the Torah, the introduction to the giving of the Torah was what? Was the going out of Egypt. Because Egypt means narrowness, constriction. And in order to receive the Torah, we broke out of the Elokim, out of the constriction. The whole energy of Yetzias Mitzrayim was Ani Havaya. God reveals Yud Kei Vav Kei. And that's all an introduction to the revelation of Torah. Now, where do we see in Torah the concept that Torah is free and uninhibited and unlimited and not defined by definitions? So he says something awesome, and that is one of the qualities, or one of the objectives of Torah, which I said I'm going to find the connection to the parsha. This week in the parsha, particularly Parsha Shemini, the Torah talks about kosher and non-kosher. It tells you all animals that are kosher. We had the Monday class, which I gave on Tuesday, in which we discussed this idea that the Torah talks about very strongly about this week's parsha, particularly. It defines kosher, non-kosher. This type of fish is kosher, non-kosher. Bird, these type of grasshoppers, kosher, not kosher. And that's in the scripture, in the written law. And then you get into the Talmudic law, you get into the Mishnah, and into there it's bound. It goes the intricacies of Talmudic study, in which we're sorting out all aspects of creation. That's what Talmudic study does. Its approach, it presents a situation, a worldly situation, which could be good, could be bad, could be permissible, could be prohibited. Food you could eat, you can't eat, you don't know. You go to the rabbi, kosher, not kosher. I have reason to say so, and then the rabbi is going to apply ideas of Torah, and based on that is going to tell you yeah or no. So this process is called the process of sorting out. purification, sorting it out, clarifying the yeah from the no, the good from the bad, the consumable from the unconsumable. So now, okay, so Torah does a bira. That Torah is this great clarifier. It's the divine clarification that comes to clarify the world. And we know that based on the Torah's clarification, those who want to follow, or those who follow as a Jewish man or woman, we behave and live our lives according to the dictates of Torah. So based on the Torah, we consume or interact with certain things in the world, and it becomes part of the Jewish experience, part of a holy life, part of a godly life where God can dwell in. And certain things we reject. We close the door. We don't let them in. They come knocking on the door. We say, no, not kosher. In other words, we send them off. When it gets sent off, means it's not invited into the divine, into the world that is going to facilitate God when Mashiach comes. It's rejected. It's told no, out, dismissed. Can't be integrated into holiness, especially since we know that everything in the world has a spark. Certain things we can extract that spark and bring it into holiness. Certain things we reject it. So two things. Torah, when you're studying Torah, it's giving us the instructions of what we can and what we cannot do, what we can integrate, what we can't integrate. Then when we live our lives in practical living and based on the instructions of Torah, we are really doing a sorting, a process of clarifying and sorting, because we're doing it hands-on. In Torah, we're doing it in theory, philosophically. In observance, in your kitchen, it's no more a theory. When you're learning the laws of milk and meat, kosher, not kosher, meat, how to, salt meat in the kosher way, not kosher way, all these laws, these are theoretical. These are in the world of law. You want to study. But when you're in your kitchen and you decide, so then it's hands-on. That's practical interaction with the world. The truth is that the study itself, even when it's not hands-on, even when it's not practical, but the study itself that rabbis or yeshiva boys or whatever it is do when they're in yeshiva and they're studying, and they're saying kosher, not kosher, pure, not pure, guilty, innocent. It's not only in laws of kosher, it's in every aspect of life. Right and wrong, when they're declaring all these things, they are causing major shifts in the cosmos. They're causing a major separation between the powers of good and the powers of evil that have been mixed together. Just by studying it, not even through implementation for sure. That's really hands-on. But even just study of Torah itself causes this amazing, magnificent clarification in all realms of existence, ultimately leaving the world in a pure state, and all evil gets expelled and flushed away, and the world gets rid of it. The world is cleansed and purified from all unholiness and is ready for the full manifestation of God in the Messianic age. Now, okay, this is the general concept we always learn. What's the chiddush? What's the novelty in what we're learning over here? So we learned an amazing idea, and that is, when do you need clarification? When something is blatantly evil, blatantly dark, blatantly impure, well, you don't need a great rabbi to tell you that. You're coming with I don't want to say evil, but something that God says he dislikes is negative. So for instance, for a Jew, you bring him a piece of pork, he knows, or ham, whatever, he knows not kosher. Farting, over. You don't need to go to a rabbi to tell you that. Even though the Torah originally told us that, but we don't need a great scholar, rabbinic mind to be able to decide it. Everybody knows, not kosher. Shellfish, not kosher. Crab, not kosher. Lobster, not kosher. Salmon, kosher. So there are certain things that are tuna, kosher. Certain things, very clear, fins and scales, kosher. Now, I mean, and where do you need rabbinic clarification? Rabbinic clarification comes in always in the gray areas, where things have reason to say like this, reason to say like that, and then you have the whole debate back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. In those areas where there is like a lot of confusion, and if we will apply it to life, in those elements that might be impure, but they're masquerading as pure. Those forces that might be putting on a show and dishonest and kind of put a face of being kind and nice and wonderful, but really are inherently evil. That's the idea, to be able to sort out and to pick around when it takes a very fine toothpick, to be able to subtly divide and separate the good from the bad, the yet and the no, and to be able to see deeper. That takes the power of Chachma. Okay. But then we learn that it even goes deeper. The power of Chachma has such an ability to find good that even when we're dealing with something that seems to be completely bad and negative, and therefore unredeemable and unelevatable, if you can say, Chachma has such a scrutinizing eye that it can see the subtle good potential even in something that everybody else would throw out. That's the greatness of Chachma. To come to a rabbi who tells you everything is no good, everything is forbidden, that's not a great rabbi. I mean, there are rabbis who do that, and whenever there's any reason to say, no, you have to be machmer, no. A rabbi who can really think and permit a situation which at first glance you would have said for sure it's prohibited and not okay. And the rabbi really dwells on it a very long time. And somehow he figures out a way, according to Torah, to allow for it to be eaten or whatever, and to be able to, that's the ultimate power of Chachma. And we find that in the Talmud, that there are so many things that seem to be squarely, according to Torah, a no-no, forbidden, no way. And the Talmud finds a little, it's not going to say a loophole, but they find a little nuance through which they can find a way in which this thing is also kosher. That power, what is it really doing? It's enormous flexibility. Based on, earlier we spoke about miracles. So we spoke about the system of creation. There is a system of creation. But those are the systems that make up nature. And we learned what's a miracle. A miracle is an introduction of infinite energy that's higher than the system of what? The system of nature. But just like there is a system of nature, there is a much deeper and higher system. That's the system of Torah, the system of right and wrong, the system of what is good and what is bad. Not the system that make up scientific phenomena, but the spiritual science, the much higher level of the system of, we know anything that has anything to do with klipa is bad. Things that are, and certain klipos, like 3 impure klipos, they have to be shunned and rejected and so forth. That's a far more, we might say, a far more fundamental system. To be able to break that system, to be able to be flexible, even where in the system of Torah, which is it's more than breaking nature. We're saying being able to see a situation that's supposed to be not kosher. And yet, and again, it's only a rabbi who is a real God-fearing person following Torah. You're not going to go find yourself over here a rabbi who's going to let you do everything. That's not someone who is that's not someone who is in a state of connecting to this chachma transcendental energy, and therefore he tells you, go ahead and desecrate the Shabbos and do whatever you want. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a God-fearing rabbi who follows all the laws of the Torah, and to him a law of the Torah is an absolute, unbudgeable. He'll die not to violate a law of the Torah. That's how serious he is in his commitment to Hashem and in Torah mitzvahs. Yet he applies the systems of Torah, which allow him to connect to the chachma of Torah. And the chachma of Torah is so transcendent that over there he can wiggle out of the stiffness of the system of Torah. Understand what I'm saying? He can find that transcendence in Torah itself to permit what would have been non-kosher and not good. Where does that come from? That comes from the power of Havaya that's higher than Elokim. The fixed laws of Torah, the definitive things, the boundaries and limitations are more from the Elokim of Torah. The Havaya of Torah is the ultimate idea of the Chachma is Beriru, that Chachma is able to do miracles in law. It's almost like the miracle rabbi who's able to, within Torah itself, reach the expansiveness to be able to redeem the unredeemable. Like you find sometimes, even just in regular life, you have people that everybody gave up on them. You have a teenager who all schools threw this person out. All schools, the guy was a total, maniac. So in elementary school, from kindergarten, the teachers couldn't handle him. Then he went to the higher school, middle school, and then high school, and then yeshiva. Everybody, it's a total, and everybody gave up on him. And the guy's literally on the street, a total outcast. And everybody only has terrible things to say about this person. And then they meet this one sage who looks this person in their eye and sees in them a potential that no one was able to see. And kind of breaks and shatters all the systems and extracts that goodness, reveals it, and kind of liberates this human being from the misery they've been all their life because they've been trapped in so much klipa. But now only this super sage was able to find that little light in their soul and be able to. You see it in the Jewish people. After the Jewish people have gone astray from the Torah 150 years ago, all religious Jews gave up on their non-religious brethren. Say they have no connection. What do you mean? Now they're already so far. They're not keeping kosher. They're not keeping Shabbos. They're not keeping, the laws of purity. They're born out of marriages that are not with Torah. They're, and therefore, even if they come back into the fold, you can't marry them. You can't, because there's so much chazarai there. There's so much garbage there. There's so much impurity. It's so treif. It's so unholy. Give up on them. Came our Rebbe, for instance, who's the super facilitator of the energy of Chachma, and was able to find in the most severe cases where you would think that this Jew buried his Jewishness to the point that it's unredeemable, it's unrectifiable, it's unresurrectable. And the Rebbe was able to resurrect that potential and bring it out of Jews across the world, millions of Jews. That's that power of Chachma. It's when all logic and systems say no, it's bad, it's wrong. Bring these people in and you just wreck everybody else. And the Rebbe said, no. Wow, look how much potential, look how much the spark is still the same idea. I'm just taking it into the people range, as opposed to before we're talking about, saying about a chicken being kosher or a piece of meat, or when everybody thinks it's not, and this one rabbi is able to come and find a heter to bring it in. What do you get from here? That Torah and miracles, the power of Chachma that's in Torah, they're the same idea. That's why in Mizmor Toda, which is the thankfulness, the song that we sing to Hashem, which we said, when a miracle happens, all you can do is surrender with Hoda, because it's bigger than your mind, it's higher, you're tapping this infinite potential, this prefixed light, this predefinition energy, which you can only connect to and submit to with Hoda. In those very words, you say, Hoda al Hashem kol haaretz, which is the acronym halacha, because that's the power of halacha. Halacha comes from Havaya. By the way, it says, regarding Torah itself, we say, means the logics of Torah in general, which is not halacha, which is not the final verdict. We say, Elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. They're the words of the living God. We use the name Elokim. But when it comes to the final halacha, on that we say it's coming, who do we follow? The person whose neshama, soul, is Vahavaya Imoy, that Yud Kei Vav Kei is with this individual. Those are the people who can paskin halach. Not every rabbi even has that unique ability to give a psak halach. To give a psak halach, which means a final verdict in behavior, which will determine yes or no. And again, the real posek is someone who can find leniency to allow for the yeah, as long as it's according to the Torah itself allows, but he's discovering something so He's discovering this expansiveness to allow even what seems to be not okay. That comes from Havaya. And that's the reason why, what's the regular meaning of the words Hariul Hashem Kol Haaretz? Hariul Hashem Kol Haaretz means shout out to God, all of the land, which also is halacha. Because when you're giving access to everyone that you would generally have said has no access, and now you're allowing all these sparks, all these entities, all this phenomenon that everybody would have said, no good, discard it, ugly, God can't look at it, it's too lowly, it's too dark, you have to reject it. And the halacha, the power of halacha came and revealed how this too could be in a relationship with God. So that entity sings to God. So Kol Haaretz, in other words, if we would only follow Torah Shebiksav, there would be so much, based on what seems like the law, there would be so much cut off from a relationship with God. The Torah Sheba'al Peh opens up the avenues and the channels through all this deep analytical to find how to elevate even the most farthest of things. Hariul Hashem Kol Haaretz. Rosh Hashanah Allah. It's meaning the acronym is Allah. That's where the whole world sings to God. Now, let me just add one more point. Now, the last point that we learned was that what we're saying now is that both in a miracle, when we experience a miracle, and through the study of Torah, we're accessing the energy of Chacham. We're transcending Bina and we're touching Chacham. We're transcending Elokim and we're connecting to Havaya. Yet there is a difference between in a miracle and in Torah study. In a miracle, when we access that transcendental energy, the only way we can connect to it is by shutting down our minds. We can't try to figure out the logistics of the miracle. We don't know what the miracle is. We acknowledge that God is bigger than our head and something transcendent happened over here. So what do? We humbled and we surrender, and it's not our mind. So on the one hand, it's very powerful because we lose ourselves in the infinite light of God. But the downside of that is that it can never become part of you, because it's the only way to connect yourself is that we dissolve of ourselves in order to touch it. You can't take it in, you can melt into it. That's in a miracle. And that's why you can't understand it. You can only haida'ah to it. You can only modim to it. You can't grasp it. But in Torah, when the rabbi is studying Torah, at the core of the study, something divine is taking place. And in the Torah that he's studying, he's touching that infinite Havaya life. And that's what's enabling this rabbi to become so expansive and see things. But at the same time, he's understanding it. If he doesn't understand it, then it's not Torah. In other words, he's tapping Chachma, but he's taking the Chachma into the Bina in a way that not only are we connecting to this lights of Chachma, but we're actually pulling it down into the Bina as well. And that's why the next pasuk is Di'u ki Hashem hu ha'elokim. Know that God is Elokim. Not only surrender to Havaya, you can know it. Da means know it in your mind. Internalize the idea that Havaya Elokim, because that's the power that Torah has. Unique aspect of Torah is that it can fuse the infinite with the finite in a way of fusion, not in a way of either this or that, bringing it together. Okay, that's the way we learn now. Now, to we learned in the previous classes. Now we continue on page 146. Now we still have to understand what connection does Ariyul Hashem have with the beginning of the Mizmor, Sha'amar Mizmor Toda. He says, Mizmor Toda, Ariyul Hashem. In other words, Toda is a song. Toda is a song that they would sing primarily when would they sing Mizmor Toda? When they brought a Karban Toda. Now, what does this have to do with the actual experience of bringing the Toda in the Beis HaMikdash? We sing it today as a substitute for a Toda because we don't have the Toda because we don't have a temple. But when we had a temple, we can bring the Karban Toda. And then they would sing this song. What does this idea have to do with literally a Karban Toda? So when I told you earlier, one of the unique things about a Toda, which makes this special Thanksgiving offering, a Toda is a Thanksgiving offering, that makes the Thanksgiving offering unique from all other offerings in the Torah is that the Thanksgiving offering, we would use chametz. That means along with the offering, which was a sheep or so, you can also, I think, you might even be able to bring a cow as well. The Karban Shalom, I think it works a cow, a sheep, or a ram. I don't think a goat. I think it's only like a sheep. That's what I think. Anyways, when you're offering this Karban, along with it, they would bring certain types of bread loaves. How many? 40 bread loaves were brought. From the 40, 30 of them were unleavened bread, or matzah, and 10 of them were leavened bread, were chametz. Now that's very unique, because the Beis HaMikdash, the Holy Temple, was kosher lePesach all year long. That means that you were not allowed to offer anything on the altar that is not Pesach Day, which means that it has chametz, that has leaven to it. Besides, the only time there was chametz in the Beis HaMikdash was by a Thanksgiving offering, and one other time on Shavuot, which is we're celebrating the day of the giving of the Torah. They brought two breads, and both those breads were chametz. Now there, it wasn't offered; it wasn't burnt on the altar. Over there, it was waved and everything, and then the Kohanim ate it. It was divided amongst the Kohanim to eat. It was the only time they were eating chametz in the Beis HaMikdash. And by the Karban Toda, there was actually some of the chametz bread. I think one of each type was offered on the altar, which means even a chametz bread was actually burnt on the altar. And then the other 36 breads, because they brought 40 and they took four of them, one of each type. They had 10, and 10. 30 of them were matzah, but I think they were made differently. And so one of each type plus again, I'm saying this based on memory, so I can't vouch that what I'm saying is 100% correct, but it's what I think it was. 4 of them were offered, and 36 was the guy would take home and he would make a party, he would invite everybody, and everybody would eat from these breads and some of the meat. And that's how they would celebrate Thanksgiving to God. Okay? So in both these sacrifices, with the only exception that you were allowed to bring chametz in the Beis HaMikdash, leavened bread. So what does that mean? Obviously, it's connected to what we said earlier, that in Torah and in thankfulness for a miracle, we're tapping Havaya. And since we're tapping Havaya, we're kind of transcending the system. That's the point. We're transcending the limitations and transcending the boundaries because Havaya is above the boundaries. So Toda is for what? Toda is for a miracle. In a miracle, and Shavuos is the day the giving of the Torah was given. So both of these are revelations of Havaya. For that reason, we're given a special permission to introduce leavened bread, which represents the concept of leaven in general, which represents a certain inflated of entity, also to be included in the relationship with God. So what's the connection? Okay, we understand that these two have a common denominator. They're both touching on Havaya. They're both connecting to Havaya. But why does it permit chametz? But based on what we just said, we already have a little bit of an answer. The idea is that chachma, as we're saying, one of the aspects of chachma, as we spoke earlier, is that chachma is free. It's still infinite light. So it's not so much. It has this ability to find an excuse, so to speak, not an excuse, a permission to find an extension to allow what's usually not allowed. And that's the reason. And how does it express itself? That in the Karban Toda and in the Karban of Shavuos, which we're celebrating Torah, you're doing exactly that. One of the greatest things that God dislikes is inflation, ego, and haughtiness, which is represented by the chametz. So usually when anybody that's haughty comes in, you just kick him out the door. You say, not over here. You can't come in. But since Torah, as we said earlier when we spoke about like the power of the greatest of rabbi, the greatest of tzaddik, is that even someone that everybody rejects, he can say, oh, you know what, I can find how you two can connect. So even the chametz, which is the antithetical, it's the antithesis to holiness and to godliness, is invited into the Beis HaMikdash at this moment. But to understand this a little better, he's going to explain the difference between chametz and matzah, and that's another reason why I chose to learn the Mizmor now, because as we are now transitioning from the chametz to the matzah, this share should be an empowerment for all the courageous women, and men can also help out, that help transition the homes from the chametz to the matzah state in honor of Pesach. So we should figure out first what is the essence of chametz and matzah, and what's the difference. Okay, let's understand Ma'ashaychus. What is the connection? Yesh L'Hariul Hashem. Mizmor, with the beginning of the Mizmor, Shama Mizmor L'Soida. Hariul Hashem. Yeah. Ma inyan Karban Toda. What is the inyan of the Karban Toda? The inyan Birur HaChachma. To the idea of Chachma, doing a Birur, Chachma having the ability to collect, to clarify. Inyan, who the idea is, the Karban Toda, who mamish. Listen, the Karban Toda is literally this idea. Kedugmas Birur the Chachma shenavar hakol. It expresses, a Karban Toda literally illustrates the idea that the clarification, the power that Chachma has, is that it's even able to elevate something that otherwise, from a more superficial state, you would say not kosher and you would reject it. We said Chachma has the ability to be able to go very far out and find a hidden potential of goodness and to be able to bring it in. Well, you see that in the Karban Toda, that you can bring the leaven in. Even though everybody says chametz, Beis HaMikdash chametz, this is a no chametz zone. Chachma says, chametz, your chametz thing, get in here. Chametz, you're full of Yetzer Hara, you're full of evil inclination. Come, don't worry, we have a place for you. Even while you didn't do tshuva yet, you didn't clean your chametz out. You're not yet a Jew. When he comes to the Beis HaMikdash, he has to be kosher lePesach. He has to kasher himself. Koshering. Everybody's for Pesach means koshering. Koshering it's a form of tshuva. If you're doing an internal koshering, what does that mean? You're extracting all of ego. You're doing tshuva. You're getting rid of all the inflated self that causes a person to separate himself from God. You're doing tshuva and you become Pesach thing. To come to the Beis HaMikdash, you have to do tshuva. You have to be in a state of your kosher lePesach. The person has to be kosher lePesach. But what happens if you're not kosher lePesach? No, all people that are not kosher to Pesach, the door is locked for them. That's why, that's the concept behind the idea that chametz is not allowed into the temple. It's expressed by the physical concept. You can't. You have a Danish. Get out of here. You have a peanut butter matzah sandwich. Come on in. Matzah is okay. Chametz not okay. Right? But because of the Chachma of Torah, we can even allow the non-Pesach Jews, even the haughty, even if there's a little haughtiness, even that, we'll figure out a way how you two can find your connection to God. And hopefully in the process, you'll lose your haughtiness as well. That's good. That's the depth over here. That is mavar everything in his kliyot. Because the sages say in the Mishnah, Kol hamenacha is bois matzah. every meal offering, whenever they would bring a meal offering, it would always come as matzah. Matzah means unleavened bread. Chutz mitoida, besides these two sacrifices, the carbon toida, shtei lechem, and the two breads of Shavuos, kidu, as it is known. The truth, it's not understood the reason, the Mishnah Zu. What is the reason for this Mishnah? Why in all the minchas and all the carbon there was no chametz? Only in these two carbon minchas toida, minchas shtei alechem, in the mincha of the carbon toda and the mincha of the two breads that come on Shavuos, the chsiv chametz te'afena. Over there it says specifically, not only are you allowed to bring chametz, it has to be chametz. You should bake it chametz. So you need to understand why is that. To understand this, let's understand first the difference between the chametz and the matzah. Because in the Zohar, the portion of the Zohar that's called the faithful shepherd, the part that comes, the Zohar that's attributed to Moshe, Moshe Rabbeinu, is the faithful shepherd. It says over there, the ikarafish ben chametz la matzah, the main difference between the chametz and the matzah, who ba'ois haches. It's amazing how chametz and matzah almost are the same word. They both have a mem and a tzaddik. Matz, chametz, matzah. They're not, which means that most of their makeup is the same. Even the third letter is almost an identical letter. A ches and a hey. In chametz it's a ches, and in matzah it's a hey. How close can these two words be? We know that the spiritual etymology, the spiritual biology, the makeup, the chemistry of everything is hidden in the letters of the name, which make up its name. So if you have two words that the letters are completely different, means it's completely two separate things. Sometimes we find that there's a connection because we find that the gematria of the two is the same. But the fact that it's only in the gematria shows that they're more different than they are alike. But when you have a word, might not be the same gematria, but it's mamish the same letters. Now, if it would be literally the same, the third letter, there's three letters in each. Two of them are the same exact. One letter is different. And there's really two differences. Number one, this is, in chametz it's a ches, and in matzah it's a hey. Which, as I just said, hey and ches are almost the same shape. The difference is that the hey's got a little window on the top on the left side, which the ches doesn't have. It's completely closed. All three have three lines, a roof and two legs. It's just that in the hay, there's a little window on the left side, which makes the hay different than the ches. Almost the same letter. And the other difference is, in matzah, that letter, the hay is in the end of the word. In chametz, the hay is in the beginning of the word. In our Mizmor, already over here, he quotes the two differences, but he only explained one of the differences. In the Mittler Rebbe's explanation on this Mizmor, the Mittler Rebbe has a Mizmor in the Sefer Pirush HaMilos, which is from the Mittler Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe's son. He has also a sefer on siddur. What we're learning is this is a Mizmor on the siddur, on the morning prayers. There, the Mittler Rebbe, based on what it says over here, answers also the second question. But here he doesn't. He only asks it. What's the difference between the chametz and the matzah? In that, number one, this is a ches, and the ches and the hay he's going to explain. Why that little change makes all the difference. Makes one kosher for Passover and one's forbidden for Passover. Makes one kosher for the Beis HaMikdash and the other one forbidden for the Beis HaMikdash. Besides, in these cases, two cases, exceptions that we said now. So let's understand what it means. It's only in the letter ches and the letter hey. The chametz number one, he says, in by chametz, the letter ches is b'tilas hateva. It's in the beginning of the word. U'b'matzah and the matzah is the hey b'sefer shaltei. The letter hey is in the end of the word. Again, and that's the question that he doesn't answer explicitly. Maybe he's expecting us to figure it out based on what he says. But the difference between the ches and the hey, there's a second difference. In other words, here, besides where it is in the word, it's also the letter itself is different. The difference between them is they're almost similar. It's only in the left leg. In the letter ches, the left leg goes all the way up to the roof. And in the letter hey, there is a hole between the roof and the short left side leg. There is one of the walls doesn't go up all the way to the roof. There's a little opening. And in the letter ches, nistam, it's closed. And that hole is closed because the leg itself rises all the way up till it touches the roof. And then it's a ches, and then it creates the word chametz, as opposed to matzah. So what's the explanation of that? What does this mean? In a yedua, it is known when you're looking at the Torah, you're looking at a very complex, infinitely complex system. Every letter of the 22 letters of the Aleph base that the Torah is made up, every letter, the different what's it called again, parts of the letter. Every letter has different strokes, different parts to it. For instance, a Zayin, it's got like a Yud on the top, and then it's got like a Vav, but a little curvy Vav on the bottom. And then a Beis, got three, but Beis is open on the side. The Beis is open on the left side and closed from the top and all around. The Ches and the Hey are both structures like this and open at the bottom. And the Hey is also open. But what he's saying is that every letter of the 22 letters of the Aleph base, their shape, the different parts of it, indicate all the 10 sefirot. Every letter has all the 10 sefirot. In the tzir. Now, since there's so many nuances in the 10 sefirot, so there is so many different letters, each one, and how the sefirot and the attributes are emphasized in that letter or expressed in the letter. The derech klal, in general, roshei shel ois, in every one of the letters, something we can say about all of them. The top of the letter, the upper part of the letter, is b'chinas Chabad, would be the head of the letters, which would be the intelligence, the chachma bina das of the letter. The soifa, and the end of it, the feet, the bottom of it, would be the b'chinas netzach hod yesod, would be the netzach and the hod and the yesod of the which are the three lower sefirot. And the middle of the letter, the emtsai, and the middle of the letter, b'chinas chagas. And the middle of the letter is the chesed gevura, the ferris of the letter. And in the letter ches v'hei. So now, once we know that's a rule by all the letters. So now let's look at a ches and a hey, which both of them are almost the same. They have three. The way they are three lines, one on the top and one on the right side and one on the left side. It's like a house, literally like a house, a roof and two walls. That's the ches and the. So what would be the head of it? Which would be the intellect of the letter? What would be the chabad of the letter? The chabad of the letter, the mind of the letter is the roof. So the top is the roof, the chabad. What is the middle? Here it's hard to say a middle because the other two are one is on the right and one is on the left. Being that we know that the right comes before the left. The right is more powerful than the left. And so therefore, the right side is the chesed gevura teferes, is the kindness, severity, and beauty, which are the middle of the 10 sefirot, the emotional attributes, but the more inner emotions. The left side is the netzach hod yesod, which is the bottom element of those sefirot, which in general means the emotions, which represents in a human being, the emotions that are more about practical, more action-oriented, as opposed to feelings as feelings are for themselves. emotions and excitement as it is for the inner human. The Netzach Hod Yesod is all about application of something. It's for example, the Chesed is, I feel kind. I feel like giving. I feel so much love and I want to give and I want to help. And the Netzach is to see it through and actually give. Not just to feel kind, but to have the determination to actually do the act, not just to feel kind, but to do kind. So it's taking it down to action. And the same is with all three. That's why they're called the legs. Legs are all about action, going out and doing something, not just feeling something. So again, the top of the letter and the middle of the letter, that's the upper line, the kava yamani, and the right side, shem b'tzir dalas, which make up a dalid. In the ches and in the hey, there's both a dalid like this. That's the chabar and the chagatz. V'adai shalosh elyon l'chenes chabar. So the upper part, that's the chachma bin adas, the kava yamini, and the right side, ahoylech lamata, which is going from up down, the vertical line, l'chenes chagas. That's the chesed gevur teferetz. The kava smali and the left side, shuregel asali, b'chenas netzach hod yisod. It's the netzach hod yisod. Now we can begin to appreciate. So what's the difference now? So now we're already what he's doing is he's fine-tuning it. And now we can analyze what would be the difference then between a closed Netzach Hod Yesod and an open Netzach Hod Yesod. What does it mean? And over here, the open Netzach Hod Yesod is good. And the closed Netzach Hod Yesod, when it's kind of locked, it can lead to problems. It's not bad, but it can lead to problems. In the letter Ches, the Ches is closed on all three sides. Which is on the top, and from both sides, kava yamin, the right side, the kava small on the left side, the right line and the left side. There's no entrance, there's no window at all. There's nowhere to escape. There's no escaping. There's just a complete closed situation. Now, if it would be completely closed on the bottom, like the letter mem, the closed mem, it wouldn't be a problem. A closed mem is a safe zone. Then it would have been no problem. The ches wouldn't have any issues. He would have been a perfect safe world. Problem is he has no opening anywhere, but he has an opening, a wide opening on the bottom, and that's where the trouble starts. The bottom of the ches is completely open, and that's where all the thieves and hackers and bad guys get in. They go right in from the bottom because it's closed. So if that's the case, you'll say the hay has even open windows as well. So not only can they come in from the tunnel in from the bottom, they can come in from the sides as well. It would seem like it's kind of even more open for attack. We know in general, so what are we talking about? We're talking about a letter. We're talking about a divine energy. What's a letter? A divine energy. It's representing a divine flow. We know that the forces of negativity, the forces of unholiness, have no energy on their own. They must steal it from holiness. They must usurp it. That's what it is. Like you see, there are people in the world that are good people. And they are hardworking people. And they work hard to feed themselves and their family and to live a decent life. And then there are people that are lazy and don't want to do the right thing. Instead, they want a shortcut. So they go to people's hard-worked monies and try to make scams. Get into their bank accounts. Every day, how many calls do I get a day? I can't even tell you how many calls I get. I probably get like 15 calls every day, scam call. And it's amazing because I block all these numbers. Every time I get I spend at least 15 minutes a day looking at numbers, scam, block, block. Today, actually, I answered one scam call. I said, who's this? And he had such a good scam name also. He actually had he's right away introduced him. He was surprised because most of the people know no one picks up for them. Finally, someone picked up. He told me his name, and I was going to tell him that's like, I said, I wanted to meet a scammer today. But he has a really good name. In any case, so while they get you a conversation and they'll sneak, they'll sell you something and it's dishonest, and then they'll take your credit card. So they're trying to steal. So just like it is, and people try to hack accounts and so on. It's all hacking. So letters are also the letters, and this whole thievery and stealing and stuff like that. This is all the physical manifestation and application of the concept in the spiritual realms above of forces of darkness that are constantly on the prowl, looking for vulnerable places where they can steal. When they see a letter ches, they get very excited. Because the letter ches gives them an opening right at the bottom, so they can go right up. And we're going to soon see a deeper understanding what the letter ches represents, why they're able to go there. It is open. It's an empty space. And that opening, where is it open? It's open below. So if up represents the flow of godliness from above, so what's below? Below represents the worlds, where there is what until Mashiach comes. Good guys and bad guys. When it's open, right, leaving a door to a mansion open, and no one is there, calling for trouble. So the ches is a little bit calling for trouble, especially since it's open. Now, if you're living in a very rural street, very hidden, and you leave your door open, okay. But if you're living right on the public thoroughfare, right over there, and you leave your door open, someone is going to help himself very quickly. This week they had, sadly over here in Beverly Hills, today's days with the laws going on here in Los Angeles, with the brilliant new DA that we have over here, who lets everybody, it's a revolving door. The guys get arrested and they go right from the other side, or they don't even get arrested when they're stealing less than. So there was a broad daylight. They broke into a jewelry store and took $3 million worth of merchandise in the middle of. That's when you have to see, because we have an open door. Even when people have locked stores, they still have an open door, because you created a lawless society. But generally, if you're leaving a door open, the Gemara says an interesting thing. The Gemara says that the rat is not the thief. The Gemara has a very interesting, and the Gemara says it's not the Gemara statement. The Gemara says this is what people say. The rat is not the thief. The hole is the thief. Because how do you have your house clogged up? The rats are no going in it. When you're allowed, that's what I remember just a few weeks ago, 2-3 years ago, sadly, we had rats in my house. And we were going crazy. My wife was going nuts. And we had this guy, he came for 2 months, this exterminator. But he said, we're not going to close every hole. But he went around and he rat-proofed the house, because he was able to find every possible. And he says they're funny. He said they can go through the hole of a pencil. That's how small they can get. They can squeeze themselves through with the smoke once they get in. So when you have a hole, you're actually calling the rats. They're looking for food. They're not bad. They're on the prowl. There's a hole there. They're going right in. So the real thief is the hole, not the. So when you create a society that is holy, I don't mean holy, it is full of holes, which means not crime-proof. When you don't hold people accountable, you're calling that the thief is the DA, not the thieves. You almost can't blame them, because they're waiting. You're inviting them in with a flag, with a. But in any case, so spiritually it's the same thing. The ches is calling for trouble, because it's open on the bottom. Masha and came, but say, hey, but what? But hold it. That would seem like the hay should be what? Even a bigger problem. Because the hay, they can climb, you block them on the bottom, you put a guard there at the bottom, they'll come from the top. They're like, they have two entranceways. We say no. Well, hey, once it has an open window on the upper top of the left wall, that's like a security camera. for the guy to look inside. And once there's a security camera, someone looking in from the top, then the guys are not coming from the bottom. Understand? The ches doesn't have any opening. So it's like a closed, it's like there's no outlets for anybody to guard. It's just open from the, onto the street, which the street in this case is below the world where there's dark. Without that watchful element watching from the top, so then it's party time for the thieves. But in the hay, there is something about that window, assuming to see what it is, that makes the house secure. Which is in the entrance of the whole mafsik being gagoy, which separates between the roof, which is the upper part, to the left side, to the left leg, that's asher betoicha, that's in it. And just like it is in the physical image of the ches, the hay, and the letter hay, you will understand above that the same concept exists. Now he's going to say like this: the letter ches and the letter hay particularly are symbolic of the attribute of malchus. Even though we said before that in each letter there are all 10 sephirot, or every letter has all 10. That's because each sphera, every element of the sephirot has the DNA of all the sephirot. Because that's what holiness is integration. So in everything, so even if let's say the letter Zion represents, Bina, let's say. Let's say the letter Zion represents Bina. In the Zion, you have the Chabad of Bina, the Chachma of Bina, the Bina, and that's where you'll see the addition. The letter Ches and the letter Hey are both representing or stand for the attribute of Malchus. In Malchus itself, there is the Chabad of Malchus, the head of Malchus, the emotions of Malchus, and the inner emotions of Malchus and the external emotions, the Netzach Hod Yesod element of Malchus. The bottom of the hay, the open, that's the Malchus of the Malchus. Malchus, that's where there's nothing. There's no protection. There's the Malchus. And that is open downward. So what does that mean? Malchus, we know, is the most vulnerable of all the Sphirot. That's why the Ches and the Hay are both hackable material in essence. The security, you have to open the other one and turn it into a Hay, it's hackable, because Malchus in general is the most vulnerable of all divine levels. Because Malchus is the last and final Sephira. It's the energy of God that's actually being communicated into the creation. Because what's Malchus? Malchus is where God is lowering himself down to be a king. Higher than Malchus, the energy is beyond kingship. So he's above being in a direct connection to worlds, to any creatures or any beings. So from those energies, no one can go there because it's God in his private state. But when God comes down to be a king over the world, he's declaring, I'm a king, which means there is a creation. So he himself is creating a creation. And in the creation, we gave a class 2 weeks ago. Last week was Purim, but Tuesday gave a class, amazing class, that when a king is a king, he's a king over his subjects. And amongst the subjects, there are behaving subjects and misbehaving subjects. Or else you have no empathy. What kind of a kingship is that everybody behaves? In other words, part of a people is that there's law-abiding citizens, and amongst you're going to have a whole law-abiding. You're going to have some of the breakers of the law. That's part. It's always going to be some. You say it's going to be some rotten apples. It's going to come in every element. So the concept is that when Hashem is in a relationship with a world, which is in the level of Shekhinah, which is in the level of Sfirat HaMalchus, which is where God lowers himself down to be closest to the worlds, over there is the most vulnerable for unholy energies to attack. Okay. Now, which part of Malchus? In Malchus itself, we're saying there are 10 Sephirot. So the Chachma of Malchus and the Bina of Malchus and the Das and all the Sefirot of Malchus are the higher part of Malchus. That's Malchus, where Malchus is still the tail end of the divine. It's still in Atzilut. It's still in the world of emanation. It's still above creation, and therefore, in the three lines, there's no virus. There's no hack. The hack is only in the Malchus Sheba Malchus, which means, where it says about Malchus, Ragleha, her feet, that's the bottom of the Ches, that's the bottom, Ragleha, her feet, Yoredes, she goes down, Maves, to the place of death. The Shekhinah goes down to sustain the lower worlds, the lower existence. That symbolized the bottom of the Ches and the bottom of the Hay. And now let's read it inside. So we're going to see. So how do you protect Malchus? How do you protect the bottom of the hay and the bottom of the ches, so to speak, that it should not be attacked by the chitzon and by the klipa, by the unholy forces, by the extraneous beings? How do you protect her? You open a window on the left side. The hay chases them away. Why? The left window in the hay chased them away. So when you have that innate protection, then she's safe. You take that away, you get chametz. He says the Malchus has 4 lines from the 4 sides. On the bottom, he says over here, but that's incorrect. It's supposed to be, it has three lines from the 3 sides. Because in a ches and in a hay, you don't have 4 lines, you only have 3 lines. But it's possible, based on what we were saying now, that there is really a 4th line as well. It's just the invisible line. Because there is a Malchus Sheba Malchus. It's just that one is not in, you don't see it in the letter, because that's where it goes down. So really, you could argue that Malchus has really 4 lines. It's just 3 of them are visible, and 1 is that you can't see. So maybe you could argue that the Dalit from the bottom, he says over here. Now, who says? The one who put this together says that in other tfusim, it says, in other prints, it says different. But in a sense, you could. I'm just hit me now. We really could read that it's 4. Because in Malchus, there's really four elements: Chabad, Chagas, Netzach Hod Yesod, and Malchus of Malchus. That's the 4th one. That's the Tumuna of, that's the Tumuna, that's the image of the Ches and the Hey. Now, the Netzach Hod Yesod, which is the final Sfirot of the Malchus, which is the left leg of this Ches and the Hey. In the Yadu, it is known, on this it says, Ragleho Yoredes Maves. Her left leg goes down to a place of death. That means she's beginning to descend. Like it says. Now, it's not really the left leg. It's at the bottom of the left leg, where it should go further, where it's open completely. Like it says, LePesach, Hashem says to Cain, who killed Hevel, his brother. Cain and Abel, when Cain kills Abel, God is rebuking him. Actually, before he killed him, God is telling him, "Why are you so down? Looks like you're down because you feel like your Yetzer Hara is taking the better over you." You know, because Cain was upset that Hevel was morally closer to God. He was offering God a beautiful sacrifice. God accepted his sacrifice. God didn't accept his. So Cain was walking around with a sour face. Why was he walking with a sour face? Because he felt that his moral deficiencies is like he was getting down. And God says, listen here, if you work hard, you can beat your Yetzer. I created you. I understand why. This is the first person who's becoming melancholy and depressed because his own Yetzer Hara, because he can't beat his Yetzer Hara. It's just occurring to me now. Imagine, this is like, there's the son of unremission. He's the consequence of sin. So he's already a guy walking around with this like feeling victimized by the fact that he is sinning and he can't overcome his Yetzer Hara. So what does God say to him? Listen here, I still gave, if you'll try hard. Number 1, you should know, LePesach Chatos Revitz. that sin is lurking and trying to get you every moment. The evil inclination literally waits every second to attack you. You got to be on duty. You got to be on vigilance. You have to be have full vigilance every second. You let go of the guard, he'll get you because he's ready to pound. I created you now, especially after the sin, with a constant hacker that wants to hack your soul. But if you will improve your ways, you'll be able to beat him. No reason to be depressed. It's in your hands. It's in your hands. Don't be a victim. Be strong and overcome. In the end, he didn't listen because he killed his brother because he was, In any case, but what is the words Hashem uses? Hashem says, lepesach, to the entrance. Chatos rovet, sin is lurking. What does that mean? Who's sin? Sin in the broader sense represents the entire realm of evil. All the satanic, demonic forces, which actually attack a person and lead a person to sin. Part of that element. Where is it lying? Where does it lay? By the entrance. So Rashi says it means, which entrance are we talking about? The entrance of the womb, which means as soon as you exit your mother, at that moment, you're in the battle. You would think innocent baby, it's so cute, so nice. No. It's got gates of horror there already. The first moment he's born. Doesn't let his mother sleep, doesn't make mad, drives her insane, it's already gates of horror. Evil inclination from the second. It's that entrance. But over here he's learning it on a more spiritual level. Pesach is the entrance on the bottom of the hay. That's the end. That's the opening of the hay, or the opening of the ches, the opening of Malchus. Over there, chatos rovet. Over there, sin is lurking. Like the Zohar says, "V'hainu the yenikas achitzonim," and that is because the deriving of energy that the chitzonim, the external forces, the forces of evil take, mascheles mechalala pasuach lamata, in spiritual origins above, from the opening at the bottom of Malchut, of the bottom of Malchus, from that vacant space. From there is where there's already the desire of the klipa to steal energy from Malchus. What is that like? It's like the public domain. People on the street. On the street, you're going to have some. There's like in your house, you will invite in whoever you feel comfortable. You have some kind of control. It's your house, control. You have a door, you have a buzzer, you have a lock. Closed. On the street, public. So there's all kinds of sometimes people and sometimes dangerous folks that are out there on the street. Now, if your house is open to the street, if you have a private domain open to the street, you got to make sure the door is locked. If you have a busy thoroughfare with who knows going on, Times Square, or who knows what, a major Hollywood Boulevard, Hollywood and Highland over there. Yeah, people going on this, and you're leaving your door, you're living right every day, you leave your door wide open. You're going to come across some really undesirable company in your house. And a lot of things will be missing. That's obviously. So that's the idea. The klipa that's on the klipa is considered the public thoroughfare. Malchus is the private domain, but that's where all the cash is and all the money and everything. Especially if you're leaving $100 bills on the table, you're gonna, you're in trouble. Stacks of cash, problem. So that's where the klipa wants to get in spiritually into Malchus through the opening door. Now let's take a look. How does this apply to a human being? We are all closed in general. We have, intellect, emotions, and stuff. That's our internal structure. Then we have our Malchus. What's our Malchus? Our Malchus is our Malchus means royalty and communication. So Malchus is our communication with the world. Where do all kinds of unholy stuff get into us and drain our energy? From where? When we're private and we're closed and we're in the inner world, no one's getting to us. They get to us when we open up the door. I'll give a simple example. As long as you're living, you're davening, you're learning, you're okay. But once you feel that you need your phone, so you open your phone. You opened up. Now you open the door. You open the door to Facebook, you open the door to here, to Instagram, to TikTok, to this. The more doors you open up, so what is going to happen? They're out to catch your soul. The advertisers are out to get you. All kinds. They're all lurching all over the place. They're following you. They're looking, and they're trying to get you. They're trying to depress you. They're trying to down you. They're trying to pull you. They're trying to seduce you. They're trying to grab your attention. That's the idea. That's the idea of the ench, the outwards. You're going out of here. You're going into your malchus. Malchus now. You need to go out, because without malchus, you can't elevate the world. You're not going to have any answer. You're not going to have any influence. You need to open up. Someone asked the question, should I get a phone or not? Meaning a smartphone, or should I keep it? I'll give you all the reasons not to get one. What do you need it for? What do you need it for? Sit in shul, learn and daven. You'll have so much less distractions. Finish, you'll be okay. But if you're someone who can influence the world, if you're someone who can give classes and teach and to inspire and give, and you can, and through reaching so many people and sending out stuff and this and that, you need it. Because if you're not going to have that, then your influence to the outside is going to be very, very limited. But at the same time, you're opening up yourself to influencing out. You're opening the door for things getting in. Just the end of the day, that's why you need a lot of shmira. It's a very big deal to go and open up a door to the outside. So it means more than just opening your house and walking out of your house. It means all the instruments we have today that give us access to the whole world, as it gives us access to the whole world, that gives the whole world access to us. Like people know that people have Google watches and Google this and Google that, and they have and people are glued to their phones because it's like you need it. You get Amazon, you get Google, you get this, you get everything you need. Make airline tickets all day long. You do business, you reach it. Everything from the ticket once, click on the phone, you get your reach. You send a message to thousands of people if you need it, whatever it is. It's like it's a light. You need it. It's unbelievable. But forget about religiously and spiritually. When you have and your GPS is GPS. Whatever you need, you never lost. Wherever you go, it'll always take you everything. Yeah, but guess what? Whoever wants your information is tracking tracking everything about you, knows exactly where you're going, knows everything you have, knows everything, everywhere you went, everywhere you're going, almost every thought you have, because it follows your patterns. So basically, when you think you have control over everybody, it's whoever it is, Mr. Google or Mr. Whatever, Facebook, or these guys in companies that are actually controlling us completely by the very thing. So you have a choice. You want to lock yourself in your inner room, and then you're closing yourself off, and no one will be able to. Then you'll be in your safe zone. No one is controlling you. No one in that. And in a sense, there's something special about that. You can be totally free, but that doesn't give you much. On the other hand, I'm saying it's a trade-off. People have to decide what. And this is all a ramifications of the way things are spiritually as well. In the bottom of the hay, which is the malchut element, that's where you open up the door and interact. You go out of yourself. That's your malchut into the outside. That's where the danger comes in. Now, should you or should you not? Good question. You should, but you need to make sure that you open up another window. Every time before you get out in the world, open up another window before that. What's the other window? I'm going to say in a moment. You got to fill yourself with a lot of chachma energy before you open up the malchus door to the outside. If you fill your conscience, if before you step out of your house in the morning, you already prayed in a deep meditative prayer, you filled yourself with a powerful connection to God, and a powerful recognition of him and his, that you're here to serve him and you're totally unified with that transcendental truth of God's being. Then you go out, you're going to project such godliness that all the klipa and all the holiness will be terrified of you. They won't step close because they can sense that radiance of strength, that unity, that oneness, that when you're walking, God is coming through you. And they're terrified of that channel. So they run for their lives. But if you don't activate the chachma, and you're just, running on what? Running on your natural, morality and goodness that you have naturally, but you don't activate a deeper, higher consciousness. A much higher guy. Then open up the door, go out on the street unprepared. Literally, they're gonna attack you from all sides. They're gonna suck every bit of blood out of you. They're gonna drain every bit of energy out of you. Before you know it, you don't even know if you're flying or you're coming or going. You might even not even realize how they've drained every bit of energy from you. That's true about walking out your door. It's about opening our phone. It's something that I feel like we all need to do. We shouldn't open our phones till 3 hours in the day, or 1 hour in the day at least. Not the first thing in the morning. Keep it closed till 11 o'clock in the morning. Don't even look on your emails. No, don't look. Spend 2-3 hours first praying, davening, connecting to your children, to important, like in a deep, real inner way. After you deeply anchored yourself with a deep strength of who you are and what you are, what your purpose in life is and what your connection is on a deeper, meaningful way, then you can open your phone and move yourself out into the outside world, because then you're going to be a projector of goodness and power through it. The klipa won't have energy over you. But even if you're still laying in bed and already you're opening your phone, before you even got to say modani, or even if you said modani, but you didn't even, and you're already checking what's going on, you lost before you even get out of bed, you're already finished for the day. The klipa has you around its finger for the rest of the day. That's the idea. You got to open the window on the left side first. The window is going to explain. The window on the left side is, since it's right under the roof, and the roof is chachma, it's a window on the top to allow chachma light in. It's like the security camera, but over here, in this case, it's allow godly consciousness in. A powerful radiance of godly consciousness. Before you open up your shop at the bottom, make sure you have your left side, the upper point over there open where the chachma light comes in. Then there is chachma, and there is bittul, and then you'll be a matzah all day long. There's no haughtiness, there's no klipa getting in, there's no. If not, it becomes chametz, sa'or, yeast, inflation, and infection. Klipa's got you. That's it. That's the nekudah. Let's read it inside. Where does the klipa come in? In the bottom. Because the forces of unholiness, they stand below. In the Kabbalistic terminology, under the Netzach Hod Yesod of Malchus, in the 10 spheros of Malchus, they have no access, but beneath it, they stand. It's like the letter Chetz Dafka. The 3 sides of the letter are closed. Mikol tzad, from every side. From there, from the 3 sides, it's closed because you don't want to allow any energy to go out. And the bottom, it's a free open window. Everybody can come. But in the letter hey, so what's the benefit of the hey? There is another regel, there's another opening between the roof and the left leg. And this entrance, this window, This window is indicative of Chachma light coming in, shining in. Why is it showing on window? Because it's bedugma lepesh sheba adam. It's similar to the mouth that's in a person. Now, I was having a hard time when I was reading this. It's compared to the mouth of the person, because the mouth of the person is a Pesach. It's an entry for, it's a window for Chachma. But what I didn't understand is when I was reading it, from your mouth, you don't take in Chachma. From your mouth, you can exit Chachma. You can share words of wisdom. You can share Chachma outward. Not here we're saying that in the hay, it's the mouth. But you want light to come in. Mouth just needs Chachma, not. But the way I understood it afterwards is that it's an opening. The Chachma is that really is like this. The Chachma is the roof. As he said earlier, remember he said the roof of the top is the Chachma bin Adas. The right side is the Chesed Gur Teferes. That means every person has a power of Chachma in his soul. Every person has the emotions. The problem is, the question is, does your Chachma have a mouth? Does your Chachma have a voice? Does your Chachma, did you turn on the transmission coming from your Chachma? Did you turn on your Chachma channel? Did you give your Chachma a mouth? So if in the morning when you wake up, you find within yourself your Chachma, you open it up and you allow it to talk a little bit. You allow your soul to speak to you before the rest of the world speaks to you. Allow the deeper, inner, higher, purest, inner core of your being to speak first. To create within yourself your outlook on life, to give you a sense of where you're going, of what your entire being is all about. So that's the idea of giving the Chachma a mouth to speak, which means from the roof creating an opening to pull down the light that's in the potential in Chachma. In the Ches, even though you have the Chabad, Chagas, it's like every person has the power of Chachma in his neshama. We have the power, holy emotions in our soul, but not necessarily that you give it to speak. You give it to open it. You give it to reveal itself. That hole on the top, that space, that window is opening up the Chachma to channel into the space to reveal its truths, its knowledge. And that's what it says, Pia Pascha b'Chachma. She opens her mouth with Chachma. That's Malchus, which is the Ches and the Hey. But Malchus is the Shekhinah. Malchus is every single Jew, every single one of us. We're all part of the Malchut experience. But we're all sent down into the world to deal with the world, to elevate the world, which means that we're all vulnerable, but we all have this enormous, incredible task to elevate and sublimate all of creation, to bring godliness into a dark world. But it's always a danger, because whenever you're put into a place to influence, instead of God forbid we influencing, we can become influenced. So how do you keep it that you're the influencer and not the influenced? For that, you got to start off continuously by opening up your own Chachma. The Chachma Sheba Malchus has to be activated and open. And that's the window that you open up. So the first thing in the morning, open up the window shades and let sunlight into your house. And do it not just before you walk out, before you pick up the phone, before you talk to anybody. Open up the shades and allow sunlight in. And let that be symbolic of what? Allow godly spiritual light to first infuse you. Fill yourself, saturate yourself with the truths of Chachma. Maybe it takes a little Torah study, meditative prayer. And then, from that place of strength, then you can open up for business. You can open up the shop at the bottom. You need to open up the bottom because you need to go out to influence. But when you will go out, you will meet only the good potential that's outside, and the bad guys will be running for their life. because there's such a projection of godliness light coming from you that the klipa is afraid of it. This is the way I understand what he's saying. This entrance to Pesach Pesuach lebchinas Chabad. It's an open window for the Chabad, for the Chachma bin Adas, shebekav v'gaga elyon. That's in the kav and in the upper. Maybe this is the reason why it is Hasidic custom that before davening, even before you pray in the morning, you should always learn some Hasidus before davening. What's Hasidus? Hasidus is these holy teachings that we're learning now. What are they? It's the teachings of Chabad. Chabad is Chachma. So if you right away in the morning, the first thing you learn Hasidus, what you're really doing is you're opening up that window. You're becoming from a Ches. You're becoming a Hey. Then you'll be humble and surrender to God all day long. You won't become an inflated ego, which has to do with all the klipa getting in. And then you'll be so potent and so powerful because you'll be a divine ambassador in this world. You're not walking yourself. You're representing a powerful, infinite being that's coming through you. You'll be a matzah all day long. And no chametz there. Because you'll be a hey, not a ches. But if you don't learn Hasidus in the morning, instead you grab your phone and spend 2 hours looking in the news. And then you start thinking about, okay, now I'm going to go David, or I'm going to go this. Done. Might as well go to sleep and wake up tomorrow. Try again. Okay. This it says by Malchus, Pia Pascha b'chachma. Her mouth she opened with wisdom. It says about Malchus, her upper mouth hazehu gili or chachma sheba Malchus tatzilus. It's the revelation of the light of chachma that's in Malchus of Atzilus. The Yedua, it is known she'ein achiza klal lechitzayim b'bchinas hachachma. The chitzonim, the extraneous forces, have no power where there is chachma. Chachma they can't corrupt. Chachma is such an acute, such a sharp, such a powerful radiance of truth that it can't be distorted. Instead, the klipa just melts from it and runs from it. Doksiv, it says in the pasuk, Yamusu v'lei b'chachma. They die, but not in chachma. That means the whole power of death, which is the power of the unholy, cannot survive. It doesn't exist where there is chachma, where there is a radiance of chachma. Because over there was no shattering in the vessels on that level. The whole power of the klip is only from the level where there's the shattering in the vessels. From chachma, there was no shattering in the vessels. The shattering of the vessels begins in bina and primarily in das and downward, but not in chachma. So that's where death starts. It's only in the emotions. Like it says in Eitz Chaim. The alkane, and therefore there is no yenika from this entrance. Not only is there the chitzonim can't come in from that left window. There they wouldn't even dare come through. But if your left window is open, then even in your bottom window, the chitzonim won't come. Even in the lower space, that's in the hay, the lower, the bottom, the chitzonim, the extraneous forces are not able to come close. Because the radiance of chachma, shemeir b'pesach hanal, which is illuminating in that entrance. I'm going to give you another manifestation to this. One of the qualities of being connected to a tzaddik, to being a chassid, is to open this window to chachma. Because a rebbe, a tzaddik, is chachma. Because they're in a state of total bittul to Hashem. They're in a state of oneness with God. They know. And that's why a person can't say, I can suffice. I have my own Jewishness. I have my own, it's good. Bittel and a channel and an opening to iskashrus, to the chachma channel, who's usually coming through the leader of the generation, the super soul. They channel this light of chachma. And all those who are deeply connected to them have that light and gives them protection. Ki b'chachma is beridu. I once saw an amazing story. One of the sons of the Michal of Zlochev, the great Hasidic master, was once asked, I told the story once by a Thursday night class. I don't remember all the details. I'm going to try to remember. I forgot his name. He was once asked, what happened was like this. It was a little town. They wanted to make a cemetery, a Jewish cemetery. There was no Jewish cemetery there. They used to have to take they wanted to make a Jewish cemetery. So the thing is that when you make a cemetery, the place it designated, there's certain things you should do first. They walk around a bunch of times and you're designated, and it has to do with basically, you want to clear the space from all kinds of dark stuff. You want to evict. If there's anybody hanging out here that we don't see with our physical eyes, but if there are residents over here that are not exactly the most desirable entity, before you bury people in this place, you want to evict these dark things. So there's a certain process you can do, but obviously you go to a high caliber tzaddik, a rebbe, a great person, and you have him do it. These guys know how to chase away the bad guys. So he came and he did whatever he did. And then when he left, he went back home, he encountered terrible things. His horse died in an accident, like all kinds of things happened. I think his father came to him in a dream, or he himself said in the end what was going on. I don't remember all that. And he brought a pasuk, a verse that expressed this idea that somehow, I got it. Go. He done nachash ale eirech hanayshich ikve sus achar. Something in the blessings of Yaakov to his son, where it says over there, basically what happened was that because he was told that because he evicted he chased them away. This was a place where they've been for years. Certain demonic forces were hanging out there, No one even necessarily knew in town, but that was their area. And when he came and he evicted them, they got very upset. So they took revenge on him, and they were going to harm him. But in the end, it was transferred to his horse and to his this and was that, and he survived. And he learned to end the pasuk. So I read that story and I was thinking an amazing thing. Here's a big rebbe. He's a big student he's a son of Reb Michal Zlochev. He's a great holy Jew. He evicts the klipa from one place, and he's in such danger because of that. And luckily he survived. And I'm thinking the Lubavitcher Rebbe sent his shluchim out across the entire world, the places where no Jews have ever been before, and to spread Judaism and open up Torah centers and build a mikveh, The Rebbe didn't create one Jewish cemetery. He created communities across the entire world. He evicted the klipa across from the entire world. He sent them running. No one ever did that. It's like the most dangerous thing. The shluchim, God forbid, the emissaries themselves should be in such danger. And yet the miracle of miracles, the Rebbe protected all the shluchim. We had, sadly, the story in Mumbai when that one Chabad house was attacked. by the terrorists in Machshama, with their names be blotted out. They killed that couple, a beautiful couple. Their son survived a couple of years ago, the Holzberg family. It's like one story, like, generally, who Shluchim need protection. And the Rebbe is such a koach, such a power, that he was able to do all of this. And why? Because the Rebbe is a man of Chachma, on the highest level of Chachma. He's Chabad. He's the Chabad Rebbe. Chabad is Chachma. And on a level, so the window of the hay is so open. And as a result of that, there's such an intense radiance of Chachma that the Chitzonim, the powers of the extraneous force, are terrified of the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Terrified of the Rebbe. That's why it's a good thing to have a picture of the Rebbe in your house, and it's a good thing to have a picture of the Rebbe in your car, and it's a good thing to have a picture of the Rebbe in your wallet. It's a very holy face. And where that face goes, the Klippa runs. The Rebbe also said people should have chitas and certain things that the Rebbe said, like to keep the shmira. And you need shmira, especially if you're into evictions and you're evicting the bad from the world. They're going to come after you. So you need an extra shmira to watch. Shmira means a protection. It's all associated with this inyan that you don't want to leave it to be a ches. But in personal avodah, it means every morning allow a little bit of this holy teaching to come into your consciousness, to fill your space before you engage the world. Ki b'chachma is biriru. Because Chachma does a bitter, he says, La'avdol bein atama l'tor, pushes away the tamei, pushes away the impure, as we learned earlier. But usually, what do you say? The ches, no good. Hey, kosher. Ches, no kosher. And that's why when you're bringing a korban, you got to make sure that, you bring only an unleavened korban because you don't want to come in with your ches. The ches is dangerous. So you can't bring a korban mincha. You can't bring a meal offering. That's a ches. You can only bring your meal offering. That's a hay. Because when the meal offering goes up, you don't want the chitzonim tagging along. You don't want them to enter into the Beis Hamikdash and steal energy. So you got to make sure that only a matzah comes in, a hay comes in, and because everything translates into physicality. A matzah, a physical bread that's a matzah, is without the yeast, is without the inflation. It's made up of a hay where there is bittul, that can go in. Chametz not, but there is an exception. And that goes back to we're going back to the beginning of what we spoke about earlier. When you're offering a Thanksgiving offering, and when you're offering a Shavuos offering, then we open up the door and even the ches can go inside, not only the hay. What does that mean? The danger of someone who is a little bit inflated, who has a little bit of the opposite of the matzah, right? Has a little bit of, is under regular circumstances. But when there is an intense, incredible, intensified revelation of Chachma, that is so powerful and so strong, then there's no problem. In other words, it's able to even allow a ches where the chitzonim are hanging on to, even them are allowed to come in because they won't do any damage, because the lights of Chachma are so powerful and so strong that it can elevate and sublimate the potential that's there, even where there is negativity. So it's interesting. So what he's basically saying over here is that there is, because it almost seems like a contradiction. We're saying where there is chachma, let me go back. Where there is chachma, it becomes a hay. The chitzonim can't go there when there is chachma light. The extraneous forces can't come, so they run away. Then we're saying that by a korban toda, when there is a heavy dosage of chachma, we can allow the chitzonim in and there's no danger. So hold it. When there is chachma, there's no chitzonim. When there's chachma, there is. Like, What is Chachma doing? Is Chachma protecting from the Chitzonim, or is Chachma elevating even the Chitzonim? Even Chitzonim means the extraneous forces. Which one is it? And the answer is, it depends what level of Chachma. This is the way I understand what he's saying. Earlier, when we're talking about the hay, we're talking about opening the window, allowing Chachma in. It means you're activating the Chachma that's in Malchut. In general, we're talking about the level of Malchus. In Malchus itself, there is the roof of Malchus, the Chachma of Malchus. We said it's possible that Chachma doesn't have a voice. So you have to activate in the morning or right before you get out into the world, you have to activate your own Chachma. And when you activate that Chachma, it will protect. That level of Chachma can't sublimate the Klippa. It can keep the Klippa at bay. It can push the Klippa away. It doesn't sublimate. But when Malchus has an enormous treat, where it's not just opening a window to its own Chachma, but where the world is being treated to an unbelievable revelation that happens, in where Chachma of Atzilus, which is way above all the spherot, the highest spheres, when there is an infusion of light from that highest level of Chachma, that Chachma is so much more expansive and so much more powerful. That Chachma has the ability to even be makarev, even bring close, like I said in halacha. Usually, what does Torah do? Kosher, non-kosher. But then we said there's sometimes a special rabbi that has such ability that he can take that which we always threw out and said is no good. He can find a regular person would do that. He wouldn't benefit not the person, and he wouldn't benefit himself. That person would corrupt him. I mean, that relationship would be detrimental to the person doing it to both ends. So for a regular person, you gotta, that's good, that's not good. But the super tzaddik, the super is able to lower himself down and elevate even that which is very, very low and invite that in. So generally, we're saying that where there is Chachma in Malchus, the Klippa can't come there. And that means be a Matzah, don't be Chametz. If it's Chametz, no good. Under the very unique circumstances, where Chachma is revealed in its most intense form, like when, for example, Shavuot, the day we got the Torah, that's the day when the essence of Chachma was revealed. That super incredible, intense light of Chachma is so powerful that it can tolerate even the Chametz and allow even Chametz to connect. In a way that it's not negative, it's actually positive. And the same is also when a miracle happens, because a miracle is a revelation of, as we spoke in the beginning of the Maimer, of Havaya over Elokim, of Chachma over Bina. That's what he's going to explain. But when there is an elevation and a clarification for the chitzonim that are holding on to the ches of chametz below, hainu, when is that? Inyan carbon chalas chametz. That's when we can bring even the leavened bread, shayakarev, the carbon toda dafka that was offered by the carbon toda, ubekarbon shtei alechem, and by the carbon of the two breads dafka, v'loy bekarbon zulasam, and not by carbonos that are not them. Not by any other carbon. Like it says in the Mishnah, all carbon minchas come matzah. So why these two carbonos? What's happening here? So now we explained on the next page. But to understand the difference between these two carbonos and the rest of the sacrifices, we need to understand them. What is the reason? So what is really the reason why you can only bring a meal offering from matzah and not from chametz? In a chametz agashmi, what is chametz? What does the physical chametz represent? the leavened bread. What is it showing? What is it conveying? In Yadna, it's the same ingredients like unleavened bread. It's only that it's got the fluff. And the unleavened bread doesn't have the fluff. The chametz thing rises and goes up. So therefore, just like the bread itself has that nature of inflation, inflating itself, meaning self-importance. So we are what we eat. When we eat these inflated stuff, it creates a certain inflation in a person's heart. It creates within the person. Now, it's not forbidden. It's not one of the foods that are on Pesach. It's this time of the year that we need to have intense. That's when we're born. We're born again as a Jew every Pesach. We're liberated. We're starting. So we need to have intense spiritual exercises. We're kind of in rehab then on Pesach. We're like in it. So at that time, you got to be on a chametz-free diet. Yeah, we got to be on a chametz-free diet. The rest of the year, it's okay. But that's what it does. Chametz, in general, it says in Tanya that through constant eating, it coarsens the person. And you have to fight against the coarsening of food. A person has to, work very hard. Just like you see people, it's amazing. Just like you find people, it's just occurring to me, this is an example that I can't believe I taught Hasidus so many years and this funny thought never came to my head. Maybe it did once. I don't remember ever. I don't remember in the 30 years I'm teaching Hasidus that this thought came to my head. You're seeing in today's world that people are very, very conscious when they eat, that they have to do exercise commensurate with what they eat. Oh, I ate a donut. I need to go for an extra run today. I love it. I ate 2 French fries. Oh, that's going to cost me tomorrow an extra 20, sit-ups. And because so you're going to pay the price. You're going to work it off. I got to work it off. I ate a big lunch. I'm going to work it off. So spiritually, it's the same thing. Every time we eat, we're taking in stuff from the world, stuff that are part of the Klippa realm, part of what is not naturally acknowledging God, because this world was created in darkness. So when we consume it, that darkness goes into us. Now, it's for a benefit, because when we do extract its potential and use it to serve God, wow, it can lift us up very high. But when we're not doing that, it coarsens. So we really, it's almost like, the same way that you have to burn off the calories, you have to burn off the coarseness. You have to do spiritual exercises after you eat. And even better, it's good to do the workout before you eat. That's what prayer is. It's a spiritual workout. It helps you burn the calories much better, and to burn out the darkness and to let only the spark shine. And that doesn't coarsen you. It's an awesome muscle. I'm so happy. It's like crazy. Got to remember it. I got to remember it for short little talk. It's an amazing thing that can go into a book. No, it's a cool idea. We need to have the special exercise that has to go along before and after. Okay, in any case. So what that does, it inflates self. Which is chutzpah. That's what klippa is. The klippa has what? The unholy has brazenness to God. It inflates itself. How does a person, entertain the thought to take all the resources that God is giving me at this moment and to defy God's will with it? Crazy. Every time we're sinning, we're doing something that God doesn't like. We're taking the resources that God is giving us, the health that He's giving us, the wealth that He's giving us, the peace of mind, the time that He's giving us, everything. God to give it, and to use it against God, that is the greatest audacity. That's chutzpah. But that's what klippa is. How does a person even think of that? Because one is so inflated with self. It's like the utmost of what do they call it today? I have a word, I always see it in the news. I look too much in the news, but there's such a word where you're when you're completely unaware, like when a person is, they use a word for it, it's not that they don't use the word detached. That's the other word that they always use. I forgot. Anyway, it's not coming to my head right now. So like, if we would really be in touch with truth, how every second, everything we have and made, so it should be to further God's interest, because he's the one supplying us with all of this, instead to do something against it. So that comes from this inflated sense of self-importance that overrides everything else. And if I'm so important, so I want to do what I want, God forbid it, even if that's in negation to a higher plan and so forth. So that's what's called the klipa. It's called shenikra malchusa b'lo tag. It's called a king without a crown. That means you have no crown to be a king. Why are you a king without a crown? I mean, there's nothing there that you can claim your kingship. Wow, what's giving you kingship over here? But you're still claiming king, even though you have no royal, you have no crown. God is a king with a crown because he has a right to kingship, because he's the true king. But any other king that claims kingship is a king without a crown. That's the klipa. Ki yadu, as it is known. Now, where is it receiving spiritually? If you go up into this, where's the klipa, which is this inflation? Where do they receive their energy from? As we spoke earlier, from the bottom of the ches. But, and the reason they can take from there is because, as we said earlier, because the chachma window is shut. When the chachma window is shut, between the roof and the left side, which means the chachma does not have a voice. That's why its feet go down below, to enliven and to sustain the klipa that wants to take energy from God and ignore him and inflate itself. Matzah represents the worlds of holiness, the worlds that receive and benefit from God and acknowledge it and are subjugated to him. That's why they're matzah. Matzah means they're not inflated with self. The ingredients that God puts into them, life, health, wealth, money, sustenance, family, time, air, breath, everything we have is put into them, and they don't add the one thing, the inflated sense of I am and I have this is all mine. They constantly recognize that it's all blessings. Every second they recognize it's a blessing from God, and therefore they're humble and just want to do God's will with it. That's holiness. So holiness is the ingredients without the fluff. The unholy is also receiving everything it has also from God, but it has one problem. It fluffs itself up with self-importance, which is completely uncalled for. So in a sense, all recipients from God are this dough. Everybody's receiving, it's the dough. God is putting in the water, he's putting in the flour, he's putting in the salt, he's putting in everything that makes up our reality. Now, our response to that will determine if we belong to the side of holiness, which is the flat dough, the unleavened, or belong to the side of the unholiness, which is the yeast, and it's inflation. So again, it doesn't have taste. Therefore, when you eat matzah, simply, it's a good food for the diet, matzah, even all year round. Because it doesn't cause, it is a humble bread. So when you eat it, it leads to humility. It's a sense of smallness, lowliness. That's why in the Agada it's called poor man's bread. It keeps us poor, keeps us in check, keeps us understanding. It takes away the haughtiness. Is stated elsewhere. And above, it represents the idea that there is bittul there, the bittul of chachma. That is coming through the left window that's up there on the top on the left side. Where when you have this bittul, the klipa can't get to the person. As we said earlier. When a person has this illumination of chachma, which brings this surrenders, chachma is the power of koyach ma, the power of being bottom. When we have this luminance constantly shining, and obviously it takes work to activate this. When we activate it daily, so then we are klipa proof. We don't become haughty. We don't become full of self, and we stay our course in doing the godly thing. And then we can come close to God all the time as a sacrifice. We can elevate, we can connect, and we are given a pass to always access everything spiritual and godly. No one has to worry that we're going to bring in dark stuff with us because we're not carrying anything dark, because we're on the holy side, on the holy team. But once a person stops being kosher lePesach, means they become chametzdik, which means they become inflated with self, full of evil inclination, Yetzer Hara. And God forbid, even if they have like a holy soul, but they're full of leeches all over them, full of klipa that's like draining their energy. And when you come into that, let's say you want to come into the holy temple to do a little dance over there, whatever it is, the leeches will be dancing with you. And that's strengthening the leeches and strengthening all these entities. You're bringing them along. You're bringing the chametz along. That's why when this guy approaches the Beis Hamikdash, the doors of the temple shut. Say, no leaven over here. Go back home. Kasha yourself. Get rid of the leeches. Deflate the ego. Come back as a matzah. You'll be welcomed in. You want to be a chametz? You want to be a big tall challah? Go home. I know what He said that's the reason why all the minchas and that's why all the mincha in the Beis Hamikdash you can only bring matzah, not chametz. Why? Now, why is it the mincha? Now, why is it important by this whole what's it called again? Restriction is only by the meal offerings. Will we make this restriction? Why? Because the different offerings and the different sacrifices that there are in the temple, bird offerings, animal offerings, each one is at a different level. Mincha, which is a meal offering, is a elevation of malchut, particularly. Mincha is malchus. In the word mincha starts with the word mem nun, which represents mayin nukvin, feminine waters. It's the malchut rising upward to connect to God. When the mincha comes, when the malchut comes to connect, we got to make sure that there's no tailgating taking place. That she's disinfected. Because if she's going to bring her germs with her, God forbid, if the malchus has not been careful when she went down into the world, and let me give that example. What does that mean in our person? We're all the malchus. When in our lives we're not careful when we associate with the world, we don't open up, we don't do heavy, we don't do intense work to open up the window of chachma. And as a result of that, our engagements in the world allow a whole lot of germs to get connected. So when we come to a holy place and we want to gain entry, we are told by this electronic thing that says entry declined. Your card is not working. Because it doesn't want to allow in. Because when the person is going to come in, if you didn't do teshuvah yet, you're going to bring a whole lot of klipa in. And God forbid, we can't allow the unholy to siphon up, to go into the place of holiness, because that will give them enormous power. So therefore we say, you got to bring the only way a mincha is kosher if it's unleavened. Because if it's leavened, it means the chitzonim, the leaven is the chitzonim. The chitzonim are inflated. That's what they are. They're full of ego. In order that they should separate from her the yanikas achitzonim when she goes up onto the altar. She can't be offered the chametz lifnei Hashem while she has chametz in front of God, so that the chitzonim, the external forces, should not be able to hold on to her. By the way, I'll give you another example for this. Shabbos, it says, Friday night, there is aliyah samalchus. The malchut goes up. The Shekhinah rises upward to be unified with her husband. And that means we, as part of the malchus, we also leave the world. The whole week we engage in the world. Shabbos, we disengage. We go into our homes. We celebrate with family. We're in the inner world of holiness. We're not in the outside world. We're not allowed to do any work. We're not allowed to engage with the outside. We close our phones. Arois, the world shuts down. We go into a safe space. But since we're going to a place of holiness, there's always a fear that the unholy things that have attached themselves to us might come along for the ride. And here's a shocking thing. We once learned a whole mimer about it, but and you'll remember in a moment, and that's the reason why you have to shower Erev Shabbos with hot water. It says when you're taking a shower on Erev Shabbos, some goes in the mikveh as well. For men, go to the mikveh on Erev Shabbos. But to take a shower, and it says specifically with hot water, because every Friday, spiritually, God releases a powerful, fiery whip that gives like a cowboy, like that. So it comes out this cosmic, powerful thing that of fire. And what it does is it separates the klipos from the Shekhinah, and it throws the klipos down, and it basically disinfects the Shekhinah. So when she goes up pure without any of it. Just like a hot shower takes away the germs and things that might have gotten on the body. So it says it has to be hot, because in that heat, in your physical shower is enclosed that spiritual energy that happens Friday afternoon. And then we were learning that whole thing about this woman who got stuck outside of the tchum, and then she didn't know about, she couldn't come back home. She went to the merchitz, and about the Eruv, the tchum was one of your most favorite classes that we had. But it's the same idea. You can't allow the chametz in, you can't allow the germs in. So you got to disconnect. Ela nekreves matzah davka. You can only bring it in only as a matzah. Shamatzah yachol l'cholol b'kedusha. Matzah represents all the things in the world that are humble, all the things that allow themselves to come into holiness. If they she'ein ba yanikas achitzayim, things that are not infected by the klipa of ego, of haughtiness. B'tamanis kaliyos, we said earlier, without the meif. But there's one exception. This is dafka by the regular minchas. But when you're offering a thanksgiving offering, Tziva Hashem, God commanded, not only are you allowed to have chametz, it's a commandment, you have to bring 10 chalas. You got to bring along 10 leavened breads. And the same is with the 2 breads that they brought on Shavuot. That has to be chametz, they should be chametz. The atam and the reason, le'eser chalat shel chametz. So here the beautiful, everything is so perfect. Why is it that they have 10 chametz chalas, 10 leavened chalas, u'shloishim chalas shel matzah, and 30 chalas are matzah? Remember we said 40 breads, 30 are matzah, and 10 are chametz. Yedua is known like this. Lefisha hamalchus nikra kisei. Malchus is called the throne of God. Even though Malchus is considered part of the divine, because Malchus is the intermediary between the transcendental and the actual creation. So Malchus itself is called like the seat where Hashem sits. A chair, a seat, a throne has 4 legs. So the 4 legs of Malchus are as follows. Like it says, V'hu kein b'chesed kisei. That the throne is prepared with kindness, and that's Malchus that's prepared with kindness, with kin. Ubekisei yesh daled regalim, and in a kisei there are 4 legs. Then yud svirashe ben Malchus bechlal. They represent the 10 sephirot that we spoke earlier. That there is in Malchus there is 10 sephirot hinted to in the roof of the hay and the right side, the left side. But it's also seen as 4 legs. So what are they? Regala yamini Avram. Now the legs over here are primarily the emotions. The intellect is it's not the legs, it's the seat itself. The roof of like a chair has a place where you sit. That's the Chabad. But then the legs, the right leg is Chesed. Avram, we know, is the right leg of the Merkava, is the right leg of the chariot. Yitzchak, who is Gevura, is the left leg. Yaakov, who is Teferes, is the 3rd leg. And what's the 4th leg? King David, Malchut. Malchus Sheba Malchus, that's the 4th leg. Now, in which part of Malchus does Malchus interact with the unholy? Malchus Sheba Malchus, the Malchut element of Malchus. That means, that's why King David is the one who's the most vulnerable. He's the one who's the God's favorite, and yet you see his life full of turmoil, and he's always praying. His enemies want to get him, and he's doing tshuva for sin, and because he's the struggling element that's struggling with the klipa, with the darkness. And that's why that's why when you're bringing a mincha, which is malchus, you're bringing 10 breads, 4 types. Because in chesed itself, one type of bread is the chesed. But it's 10 breads because in chesed itself, there is 10 sefirot. In the chesed of malchus, because everything is 10. In the gevura of malchus, there's 10 sefirot, so that's the other 10 breads. In the tiferes of malchus is also all 10 sefirot, and that's the 10 breads. These are the 30 breads, but these are unleavened, because on the level of an atzilus itself, there's no ego, it's purely divine, it's purely holy. Over there's no, germs can't get in there. It's complete. But in the 4th leg, that's where malchus goes down low. Over there, it gets infected by the yeast. There is the vulnerability to the klipa. And what has to happen? And Hashem says, so usually you say, disinfect before you come. And if you can't, then you're not coming in. But on a special occasion, like on Thanksgiving offering, when there's and we'll see why in a moment, since the chachma energy is so strong then even even the chametz breads are also invited in, as he says. The malchus is malchus of malchus. David, and that's the element of David. And the 3 legs, which are the chesed, they are on the level of atzilus. The chitzonim don't have any access to that. The noiga de biyav, the klipa noga of bri yitzir and asiyah. But from the 4th leg, shu malchus, the malchus, which is the malchus of the malchus, and it has 10 spheres inside. Gamkein, watch shaharei sharshu b'chinas nehidazah shememenu binyan malchus. The concept that malchus is built from the highest spheres, so therefore it has in every element of it, it has all 10. Which that's where the Eitzadah starts. There is 10 chalas of chametz, 10 breads of chametz, of leaven, neged yut sviros, the malchus, corresponding to the 10 spheros of malchus, shenachazim ba'achitzonim, and where the chitzonim, the extraneous forces, can get in, can become, can hold on to. But yut spheros the noiga, through the 10 spheres of the klipa of noiga, just like it says, her feet go down in the klipa. Like we said earlier, that in the ches, which is the part which is the vulnerable, the open bottom, which is the malchus of the malchus. Canal, but pirisha is ches the chametz, of the letter of ches of chametz. The shloishim chalashal matzah, and what are the 30 matzah breads? Neged b'chinas chagas. They are the chesed gevurah teferes of the throne, the 3 legs. Over there, the klipa doesn't get to. Canal the pirish matzah, like we explained that why the matzah is safe, because in that place is safety without it. However, why is it that by these 2 korbanos we say that even where chametz is not rejected, and the chametz is also allowed in, will be understood based on what we said earlier, based on how powerful chachma is. That chachma, when you're getting into the highest levels of chachma has the ability, as we learned in halacha, that a case which you would think is bad and unacceptable and completely abominable and completely thrown out, the ultimate chachma representing God's transcendence can look at it and show and reveal how it too could in some way serve the purpose and be included in the higher plan. The name of it is explained earlier, being not bitter the chachma, that chachma has a power of bitter. Chachma has such expansion, such expansivity, that it could elevate everything. Even from the tree of knowledge that's good and bad. From the reason that is said earlier. It's able to stretch so far that even the chametz that is sheyesh b'achizol lechitzainim, that there is a grasp to the extraneous forces. Canal yochel gamulalois is also able to be elevated v'likolel b'kedusha, and it's able to be. Yeah, you move the car. Yeah. So you're blocking. I'm scared that someone can't go out. Please do it before she comes and knocks down the door here. Yeah, we'll talk later. Yeah, you have to be careful when you're parking over here. Is she okay? I just want to make sure. Where did she park? It's okay. Yeah? She's not even from you. It's okay, she's coming to the front. Thank you. Take care, be well. Talking about the chitzonim coming and yelling and making a fuss. Yeah? Maybe we should invite her in now too. The one who's yelling. Now that we can elevate even the farthest, we should bring her in as well. No, maybe. Not Pesach yet. Huh? No, Pesach you can't have the. Yeah. Okay, we're back. We're back on. I'm sorry, guys. We had a little bit of an interruption over here. The Clippers weren't so happy with the whole situation. Okay. Okay, welding over here. Why is it though? Because there's such a powerful revelation of Chachma, then it allows even the chametz that there is achizah lechitzainim, even where there is this bacteria. It too can be elevated in holiness. Through the beer of Chachma. That's why by a carbon Toda, they offered even chametz. In these, only in the 10 chalas, where the 10 spheros of Malchus lowers itself down into the 10 spheros of Klippa of Noga. Since carbon Toda is coming in a manner of acknowledgement and thanksgiving carbon, and we said that the thanksgiving, that whenever you're surrendering your mind completely, you're touching upon such transcendental levels of the divine, of chachma, but not the chachma that is usually shining in Malchus, a much loftier level of chachma. And therefore it has that ability to break the ordinary rules and do an exemption, and to exempt and allow in even what is usually not allowed in. And therefore, Mizmor Toda. That's why by the carbon Toda, what do we sing? We sing about halacha, because that's what Torah does, the same thing. Also, Hariyah Hashem Kol Haaretz. All the elements that have been leavened in the world are singing to God, because they too are allowed in. But also, what does that mean? It doesn't mean that you allow in the klipa. It means that because there's such a powerful radiance of Chachma, the lights of Chachma are going to break even the toughest klipa, even where there is chametz, and shatter the ego and bring out the potential. In other words, by every other korban, you can't come in with the ego. When the ego is coming in, you're disqualified. Get out. Go work on yourself outside. Deflate your ego. Become a matzah, and then come to the temple. Over here, we allow everybody into shul, even those that are ego. But we know because the power of the holy day of Yom Kippur, or I can give an example of such a day, is that even people that have not prepared for Yom Kippur, or have not this, when the lights of holiness will come, it will break the klipa and will extract their thing. In other words, it's not like now it's okay to bring in the klipa. We know we can rely on the chachma to bring out the potential, even where regularly, based on the regular laws, we say it's not ready for elevation. And here you could have, that's why the word hariyu means two things. Hariyu means shouting out. Hariyu also comes from the word smashing. Because the power of Chachma is so strong that it will smash even the most arrogant of Klippa. It will smash the Klippa. It will break the haughtiness of the most haughty. They offered even the 10 chalas of chametz. Because everything is brought in. Even things that generally would not make the qualification. They would not make the bar to enter. Canal. That's why shout out to God the whole land. Which wouldn't happen by any other korban. You couldn't bring in any leaven. Any leaven and any chametz don't bring in. We don't have the ability. When you're noticing ego, no, can't be let in. Only the powerful radiance of Chachma has the power to deal with it. And you can't access the Chachma. That Chachma should shine only where there is when there is thanksgiving, there is a complete surrender. But not in any other sacrifice, which is more related to comprehension, understanding, but not with this total. A miracle is what calls forth this like whoa, and when we're wowed by the transcendence, by the incomprehensibility of the divine, that creates this openness. And when there is this surrender and this openness, when we lose ourselves, that's when the Chachma shines. And when Chachma shines, we can bring about that even a chametz, someone who's dealing with the chametz, can redeem his potential, so to speak. Which is in the korban Toda. Now, the other time that is done is not only by korban Toda, but also by the two breads on Shavuos. Why? Because we said in Torah, we also access that in. And Shavuos, God gave us the Torah, which is the essence of Havaya. Which is Chachma Davka. You should offer it as chametz. As it is known, because at the time of the giving of the Torah, then the Jewish people rose up to receive from the supernal Chachma. Because Torah comes from the highest level of Chachma. And with the power of Chachma of Torah, to purify everything, to elevate everything. And that's why it says that chametz you should bake it. That even chametz can be elevated. Like it says, when God came down on Har Sinai, when God came down on the mountain, on Mount Sinai, it was to correct even the uncorrectable. Hashem is coming to redeem and to fix the entire world. It was such a high revelation. For example, we know that until the giving of the Torah, we couldn't redeem anything physical. The only way to connect to God was in the spiritual range. Once the Torah was given, we could access and connect even in the world of ego, even in a world of such density, because the lights of Chachma came down in such a powerful way. to allow us to rectify even on such a low plane. It's that power that can reach even into the desert. Desert is generally a place of unholiness. So now we understand the difference between all other sacrifices to the carbon toda and the two breads. And that's why it says, that's why the sages say all the meal offerings was matzah chutz metoda. Come as matzah without toda. Okay. Now it's interesting. I'm just going to add one more thing. In the bottom over here in the footnotes, in the new print, he brings an explanation from the Mittler Rebbe, where the Mittler Rebbe distinguishes that there is still a difference between the Toda, the Karban Toda, and the two breads of Shavuos. By the Karban Toda, only 10 challahs were chametz, and the rest of the 30 were all matzah. But in the two breads of Shavuos, the entire thing was chametz. So he explains based on what we said in the beginning. Remember, I was telling you in the beginning that even though both, where there is acknowledgement that's related to miracles, where we surrender and we experience Havaya, and in Torah, there's both a revelation of Havaya. And when there is a revelation of Havaya, there is this higher, right, this higher potential. Yet we spoke that in Torah, it's stronger than in a miracle. Remember, that was what I said at the beginning of the class today, that in Torah it exceeds even than in a miracle. So that expresses itself over here as well. The fact that 30 of them are matzah and 10 are chametz means, this is what the meaning he explains, means, number one is that you can only deal with a little bit of ego. Most of it has to be matzah. And even when with the little bit of ego, what's happening is the way you're fixing it is it's a minority. So it becomes like, it kind of like gets together with the matzah. It kind of goes along with it. It's kind of like swallowed up together with it. And the way it is that the ego has to cease to be ego. It has to stop being chametz. It's chametz, but it can go, it like slips in together with the matzah. But on Shavuos, while it is chametz, it can be elevated. It doesn't have to surrender to anything else. As chametz can be, it can go up. Why? So he explains, because in a Toda, it's not the revelation of Havaya himself. It's only a radiance of Havaya that's felt. It's Havaya shining in the name of Elokim. So it's only the external part of Havaya that is being revealed. Since it's only this external part of Havaya that is being revealed, its level of expansion and its level of capability still has some kind of a cap. And therefore, it will only allow the chametz in if the chametz can do, even if it was chametz already, if it can flip over and become matzah. In other words, if someone who's full of ego can kind of bend himself, and then it can be to utility of holiness. But while the ego is ego, it can't be used for holiness. But when the essence of Havaya is revealed, then the something doesn't have to become nothing in order to connect. The recipient, the creation, even while he has a self, could, in the state of selfhood, become unified with God, which is going to be at the Messianic state. When the ultimate union between us and Hashem is going to be, even the sense of self-importance will not be a contradiction to God. Because the truth of God will permeate so strong that it can afford that we should be important in our own eyes and not negate him, but yet that itself be an extension of his importance. It's like the ultimate state of unity between us and God. In other words, till now, on a lower level, you have to relinquish yourself for God's truth. And we have to become not in order. But when we are being ourselves and feeling ourselves, that's a contradiction to him. But when his ultimate truth is revealed on a much deeper level, it can embrace even us being us, and we don't lose connection with him in that. So the chametz can remain, doesn't have to even have bittul. That's what he says, very powerful words. The yesh, as it is a yesh, can unify with the true yesh. In other words, our somethingness will be ultimately our sense of somethingness will ultimately express his somethingness. While we are something, and not while we are nothing. And that's what Torah does. What does Torah do? Torah, halacha, what does it do? Halacha doesn't destroy things. Halacha makes you take everything and operate with that thing in accordance to God's will. And then it can remain as it is. It doesn't have to stop being. That's what halacha, what's so beautiful about halacha, about living a godly life. It teaches you how to be a you, but inconsistent with God. And you can be you and God at the same time. As opposed to it's either him or you. Which is every other way besides Torah that connects with God requires a surrender. In Torah, it allows for the world to be a world. It's just, you have to align it with the rules of Torah. That's the chiddush of the Korban Toda in it because it's the essence of Chachma on a much deeper level than what, I'm sorry, not the Korban Toda, the Shtei Alechem, the two breads of Shavuos, which is even stronger, far more potent than the Korban Toda, which is only a radiance of Chachma. And therefore, even though you allow the chametz, the chametz has to tag along with the matzah, but it can't stand on its own right. And the tag along with the matzah means it must learn from the matzah how to be humble. In other words, you want it to constantly be attached to the matzah, but you can't allow the chametz to stand on its own. That's the beauty of Torah, which it ultimately can allow the something to be a something, and yet be a recipient of ultimate truth. Because it's revealing a level of God where God is not threatened by the existence of us. You know what? He is so absolute that us being us doesn't in any way threaten his exclusivity. It's us and him at the same time. And we are so comfortable and so aware of him that the fact that we have an inner, oomph to self is not dismissing us of him. Ultimately, it's the ultimate healthiest relationship, where a couple can both be. One doesn't have to be silent in the other's presence. They both can be, and yet in their beingness, they see each other's being in each other's beingness. It's the ultimate fusion. Torah accomplishes that. Okay, there's the last part of the Maimer, which is continuing on to the next part, which is Ivdus Hashem b'simcha, serve God with love. We're going to leave that Be'ezus Hashem for next week. L'chaim.